Chapter 178. The servant girl looked shocked and scared. Her face turned pale and she trembled, but she dared not move. "Tell me, who are you looking for in our mansion?" Nanny Zhou snorted and said, "If it is not a big deal, our mansion will not investigate it." "Looking for child of Duke." The servant girl lowered her head and said hesitantly. "Child of Duke Yong. Child of Duke Yong's mansion." Nanny Zhou was stunned. She opened her eyes wide and stared at the servant girl in front of her. The only child in Qin's mansion was Di Yan, who lived in the mansion temporarily. "Yes. I am looking for child Di." The servant girl became more timid and a little flustered. "Who is your master in Duke Yong's mansion? Why do you come to child of Duke Yong's mansion at this time?" Nanny Zhou looked the servant girl up and down again, and her face became cold. This set of clothes did not look like the clothes of Duke Yong's mansion. My miss is not from Duke Yong's mansion." The servant girl had been forced to give in, but she did not dare to escape. She could only explain in a panic, "My miss is the cousin of child of Duke Yong. She really wants to find child of Duke Yong for something." Her look and her flustered behavior showed that she did not seem to have nothing to do. Moreover, when Nanny Zhou heard the word, cousin, she was very concerned. "Cousin of child of Duke Yong? Which family's cousin?" "My miss is the niece of Countess Yong. She is talking with Madam now." Suddenly, Madam felt uncomfortable. "My miss panicked and sent me to find child of Duke Yong." The servant girl pinched the corner of her clothes and stammered. Nanny Zhou sneered. There were so many people in Duke Yong's mansion. Even if something really happened to Countess Yong, why would she be in a hurry to find child of Duke Yong? If something big happened to Countess Yong, she would not find child of Duke Yong, but Duke Yong. If it was a trivial matter, why would she come here? Almost in an instant, Nanny Zhou was sure that there was something wrong with this Mississippi. "How did you get into the mansion?" I said I'm a servant of Duke Yong's mansion and I came to see heir of Duke Yong for something." Most of the things had been told, so the servant girl did not dare to hide anymore. Di Yan's status in Qin's mansion was unusual, so the people at the door certainly didn't dare to stop the servants of his mansion. However, this servant girl had found a loophole and entered the mansion just like that. "Is your miss the countess's niece?" Nanny Zhou continued to ask. "This. You can go to Shitsi." The servant girl was really flustered. She looked around and forced a smile. "Nanny, I still have something to do and have to go back to serve Countess Yong. I'll go back first." The servant girl was also smart. She felt that it was impossible for her to see Di Yan in this situation. She might as well think of a way next time. Since heir of Duke Yong's mansion moved into Qin's mansion and heard from the people of Duke Yong's mansion that heir of Duke Yong was going to marry this cousin of the Qin family, Miss had been worried. In fact, she had been waiting outside the mansion for a few days. She just wanted to see Di Yan when he came out. However, people in the mansion did appear from time to time, but there was no one from heir of Duke Yong. In the past, heir of Duke Yong's mansion did not look like a person who could stay at home and would leave the mansion every day. But now he was so peaceful in Qin's mansion, which made her miss more and more uneasy. It was really unexpected that she could come in today. Originally, when she was anxious outside the mansion and had no idea what to do, she heard passers-by say that the servants of Duke Yong's mansion often came in and out of Qin's mansion. They even joked that Duke Yong's mansion regarded Qin's mansion as their own mansion. Even the servants could come in and out at will. When they entered the door, they only needed to say that they were from Duke Yong's mansion. This reminded her. She immediately went to the door and forced herself to say that they were servants of Duke Yong's mansion and came to see heir of Duke Yong's mansion for something important. As expected, the servant at the door let her in and asked her if she wanted to show the way. After she said that she knew the way, the servant at the door let her in by herself. After entering the door, she got lost. Fortunately, she passed by a servant girl. She stepped forward and asked the way. The servant girl was a warm-hearted person. She came over to show her the way and then pointed to Chuehua Gate from a distance to let her go. Originally, she thought that she would see heir of Duke Di soon. Unexpectedly, a shrewd old maid appeared at the door. At first glance, she knew that she was not as easy to fool as the servant girl just now. Hurriedly, she turned around and wanted to avoid it. Unexpectedly, the old maid's eyes were so sharp that she saw her at once and threatened to send her to the official office. Now, the servant girl did not want to see heir of Duke Di anymore. She just wanted to go back as soon as possible. Are you going back to Duke Yong's mansion now? Nanny Zhou asked with a faint smile. Seeing her expression, the servant girl's heart skipped a beat. She had a bad intuition, but at this time, she could not deny it. She could only bite the bullet and said, "Yes, I'm going back now. I'm afraid that Madam and Miss will be anxious." What a coincidence. I'm going back too. Let's go together. Nanny Zhou said with a smile. You. The servant girl was stunned. What? Are you a fake? If you are a fake, then send her to the official office. Nanny Zhou's eyes became sharp, and the smile on her face disappeared instantly. No, 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 of course, I am a fake. Then let's go back together. After thinking for a while, the servant girl gritted her teeth and said. After entering the mansion, it should not be difficult for her to find an excuse to slip away. The old maid in front of her did not know her, but people in Duke Yong's mansion knew her. Okay, then let's go. Nanny Zhou narrowed her eyes, looked at the servant girl, and said meaningfully. After they reached an agreement, the two of them walked out together. When the two of them walked far away, Qin Yu came out from behind a tree. Looking at the two of them walking away, a smile appeared on her face. Sure enough, it was as Miss had expected. Once Nanny Zhou saw this servant girl, she would definitely not let her go. She turned around and went to Chuehua Gate. The old maid guarding the gate saw that she was carrying a food basket in her hand, so she let her go without asking anything. Just now, she went out of Chuehua Gate with the excuse of sending snacks to Qin Huayong. When she returned to Zhifang Pavilion, Qin Wanru was sitting in front of the window, talking to Nanny Zheng. Qin Wanru had just demonstrated the etiquette, and it was very standard. Nanny Zheng almost didn't need to demonstrate anything. However, Nanny Zheng felt that it was necessary to tell Qin Wanru in detail about the rules in the palace and the things that should be paid attention to in the palace. When they were talking in detail, Qin Yu lifted the curtain and came in to report, Miss, Nanny Zhou and that servant girl left together. Qin Wanru was not surprised about this situation. In her previous life, this cousin Miss Ning had been in a relationship with Di Yan. Later, she even became Di Yan's mistress. Qin Yuru didn't know how she knew the existence of this cousin Miss Ning, so she led a group of people to beat her. This Miss Ning was delicate and weak, so she fainted on the spot. It was also because of this that Di Yan was furious, and even Countess Yong stood on this cousin Miss Ning's side. For a time, rumors were all over that Qin Yuru was jealous and could not tolerate others. Later, although Duke Xing's mansion helped to suppress the rumors, Duke Yong's mansion still allowed this cousin Miss Ning to marry into Duke Yong's mansion as a concubine. Moreover, it was said that even if she was only a concubine, Duke Yong's mansion also promised that if she gave birth to a child, she would be promoted to a co-wife. After all, this cousin Miss Ning almost became Di Yan's legal wife. The reason seemed to be related to Qin Yuru, which was also the reason why Qin Yuru had to agree later. But it was a little strange when she thought about it. Why did Qin Yuru suddenly let Madame Ning marry into Duke Yong's mansion without crying or making a fuss? Moreover, she even took the initiative to help. According to Qin Yuru's character, she didn't seem to be so easy to talk to. She even offered her such a good condition. After that, it was said that Qin Yuru and Madame Ning got along very well, but Qin Wanru had never seen Madame Ning. It was not because she had never been to Qin's mansion, but because Qin Wanru lived a secluded life at that time. But it was very strange that this cousin didn't give birth to any offspring of Duke Yong's mansion until he died. Coincidentally, Qin Yuru did not give birth either. In summary, Qin Wanru knew that this cousin miss had some means. Otherwise, she would not be able to enter Duke Yong's mansion under such a disadvantageous situation. With her identity, Duke Yong's mansion would not like her. She was just a niece of Countess Yong. Where has Child D been these days? Picking up the teacup at hand, Qin Wanru took a sip, and her eyes fell on the smoke rising from the teacup. Child D spends most of his time at Madame D's place, and he spends a small part of his time visiting First Mississippi. But he occasionally meets First Miss Chi, and they talk in the garden. Qin Yu answered after thinking for a while. Child D of Duke Yong? Nanny Zheng asked on the side. Since she sold herself, she also showed her loyalty to Qin Wanru. At this time, when she heard Child D, she immediately guessed that it was Countess Yong. Before coming to Qin's mansion, Nanny Huang also repeatedly mentioned Madame Qin, saying that she was the daughter of Duke Yong's mansion. At that time, she married into Qin's mansion and gave birth to a daughter, who was First Mississippi. As for Second Miss, she was not Madame D's daughter, and seemed to be fostered under the name of Madame D. Therefore, before meeting Qin Wanru, Nanny Zheng thought that she was just a poor daughter of a concubine raised under the name of the official mother. Unexpectedly, what she saw was not a timid little girl at all. And what Qin Wanru said next made her even more convinced, and she even sold herself. If someone told Nanny Zheng that she would sell herself before coming to Qin's mansion, she must think that person was crazy. Since she really regarded Qin Wanru as her master, she felt that she must tell Qin Wanru something. Compared with Qin Wanru who just arrived in the capital, Nanny Zheng knew a lot of things. It's Child D of Duke Yong's mansion. The mansion means that Qin Yuru may marry him. Qin Wanru nodded and didn't hide it from her. This Child D has a bad reputation. In the past, he also snatched a woman from someone outside. It seems that the woman was a young prostitute in a brothel. They quarreled fiercely, and someone even accused him in the imperial court. Nanny Zheng thought for a while and found some things about this Child D from her memory. Although she was not in the palace, she was the chief palace maid at that time, so some words naturally came to her ears. Snatched a woman. Qin Wanru really didn't know there was such a thing. She looked surprised and asked, who did he snatch her from? It seems to be a son of a relative who has a relationship with Duke Xing's mansion, but he is not the son of Duke Xing's mansion. I don't remember the specific details. Anyway, it was a big trouble. Not only did Child D lose face, but also the people of Duke Yong's mansion. Nanny Zheng said. Chapter 179. It seems so, but I can't remember it clearly. It seems to be a very common surname. He is a nephew of Duke Xing. I heard that because of this, Duke Xing was so angry that he beat him half to death, and so did Child D of Duke Yong's mansion. As for the young prostitute who caused trouble, she was sold far away. Later, this matter became a joke in the palace. Both of them were beaten several times, and the matter was settled. But because of this, Di Yan became the representative of the libertine in the capital city. Nanny Zheng, do you know who Child D was going to be engaged to before? Qin Wanru asked with her eyes down. Her hand holding the cup slowly relaxed, and her lips slightly curved with a trace of sarcasm. She really didn't expect that in such a big world, she could actually hear the news about the libertine that Madame D had arranged for her in the last life. I don't know about this, but it seems that because of this, the family of the girl that Child D was going to be engaged to objected, and then they said it was okay. I don't know the details. Nanny Zheng was in the palace at that time, so she heard a lot and knew a little. She took a deep breath, suppressed the rolling coldness in her heart, and raised her head again, and her face had returned to normal. Since some things couldn't be avoided, then there was no need to hide. Yujia, are the new clothes in the sewing room ready? Taking a deep breath, Qin Wanru turned to Yujia and asked. Not yet. The supervisor of the sewing room said that it was the first time to sew clothes for masters and ladies, so they must do well. It may be a little slow, but the finished products will definitely satisfy you. Yujia just came back from the sewing room, and hearing Qin Wanru's question, she answered hurriedly. Did you see first Miss Chi's person? Qin Wanru raised her eyebrows. Yes, I did. I took a detour to see who it was. It was Chuni, Miss Chi's servant girl. She was very enthusiastic when she saw me and asked me what I was going to do. I answered according to what you said. Chuni especially asked you what patterns you would embroider on the clothes, and then she hurriedly ran away. Thinking of Chun-Yi stopping her to inquire about the news, Yujia actually felt quite speechless. This first Miss Chi's thoughts were almost written on her face. She was an unmarried miss who was not related to Child D. Was it really good for her to send someone to stop her and ask about Child D's news? However, this was also what Yujia needed. She went out today to lure Qi Rongji to the needlework room. She praised the craftsmanship of the needlework room as if it was the best in the world. She also described the characteristics of the clothes in Jiangzhou as nothing special. She also said that people in the capital liked to embroider beautiful embroidery patterns on the corners of skirts. This first Miss Chi, who had always wanted to be in the limelight, would definitely be tempted to have a look. Since things had been arranged properly, Qin Wanru did not say anything more. She asked the two servant girls to follow her to listen to Nanny Zheng's rules and things to pay attention to. The next few days seemed to be very peaceful, but Madame D seemed to be very busy. From time to time, Nanny Zhou could be seen traveling between Qin's mansion and Duke Yong's mansion. She even brought a few old maids from Duke Yong's mansion, saying that they were sent by old Madame of Duke Yong's mansion to take care of Madame D. Of course, this had nothing to do with Qin Wanru. No matter how noisy Madame D was, it didn't affect her. Of course, this was not only because of Qin Huayong's warning, but also because Madame D couldn't free herself now. Di Yan and Miss Ning had been friends for a long time, and maybe the Ning family always thought that their daughter could marry into Duke Yong's mansion. Qin Yuru suddenly appeared out of nowhere, and it was not easy to become the wife of Child D. When Qi Rongji came over, Qin Wanru was not too surprised. After inviting her into the room and sitting down, she asked someone to make tea and bring it in. Qi Rongji came in with a smile, and it was obvious that she was in a good mood. The clothes she was wearing were also new and very fashionable. It was indeed the current style in the capital city. It should be sent to her when Qi Tianyu came to the mansion last time. However, these days, she met Di Yan in the garden every day, so no matter how many new clothes she had worn all of them at least once. With Qi Rongji's temperament, how could she not want to make some new clothes? Sister Wanru, the clothes made in the sewing room. Did you draw the embroidery patterns yourself? Qi Rongji came straight to the point as soon as she entered the room. Can you also let me use the patterns? I want to make a few sets of clothes, otherwise I won't have clothes to wear when I go out. I heard that there will be a flower appreciating banquet in the capital city. Don't you have a lot of clothes? Qin Wanru looked at her clothes reluctantly and said. They have all been worn. If I wear them out at that time, not only will you think it's not good, I will also think it's not good. Qi Rongji said matter-of-factly. When she was in Jiangzhou, she liked to make clothes the most. Every time she saw beautiful materials or clothes that looked good, she would sell them. Therefore, every time she went out, she would wear different clothes. It was like this when she was in Jiangzhou, and now she dressed for the man who liked her. I like that style very much. Qin Wanru said hesitantly. It doesn't matter if you like it. We can wear similar clothes. Isn't it better to look? Qi Rongji looked up and down at Qin Wanru's small body, and said with contempt. Wearing similar clothes could make people clearly distinguish which one looked good and which one did not. Compared with Qi Rongji's small body, Qin Wanru was a joke. At that time, others would only think that Qin Wanru copied her embroidery pattern and imitated her. She would definitely be the joke. Qi Rongji was still very confident about this, so she came to ask Qin Wanru for embroidery patterns. As for whether Qin Wanru would be laughed at in the end, it was not within her consideration. Moreover, she was very happy to see Qin Wanru being laughed at. With a person like Qin Wanru, who was as small as a bean's teeth, as a reference, everyone would see that she was outstanding. We are not sisters. What's so good about wearing the same clothes? Qin Wanru looked at her and said with a serious face. It was obvious that she was very unwilling. I live in your Qin's mansion and wear similar clothes to you, which also means that you really take good care of me. My parents will also thank you when they know, and others will also think that your Qin's mansion is benevolent and righteous. Qi Rongji felt that she was in a good mood, so she did not intend to hold a grudge against Qin Wanru. Moreover, she also decided to appear in front of Child D in the future with a gentle and dignified look. She should put away her temper in the past. I don't want it to be exactly the same. Qin Wanru said angrily. Okay. Then I will ask the sewing room to embroider it for me. Qi Rongji said with a smile. She thought that if someone had a problem with the embroidery pattern on their clothes, she would definitely say that Qin Wanru saw her drawing and copied it. Since she had said what she wanted to say, Qi Rongji felt that there was nothing else to say to Qin Wanru. She stood up and was about to leave, but when she heard the following words from Qin Wanru, she sat down again. Yujie, is Child D still in our mansion these days? These days, she did not see Di Yan and did not know what he was busy with. She wanted to deliberately meet him, but she did not see him. She was very confused at first, but she also knew that it was really inconvenient to ask about Di Yan. If Madame D and Qin Yuru knew about it, there would definitely be a dispute. It was best to ask about it from Qin Wanru. After sitting down again, she picked up the teacup on the table and took a sip, but her ears were tightly listening to the conversation between Qin Wanru and Yujie. Miss, I heard that something happened in Duke Yong's mansion. Not only Child D, but also First Miss has been running to Duke Yong's mansion these days. Yujie answered. What happened? Qin Wanru asked casually. Qi Rongji blinked her eyes and listened more carefully. She slightly lowered her head, but her attention was all on Qin Wanru and Yujie. I don't know, but that day. I heard Nanny Zhou and Mei Shui, who was serving First Miss, said. When Yujie said this, she seemed to look at Qi Rongji and felt a little afraid. She leaned over and whispered in Qin Wanru's ear. This sentence was very light. Even if Qi Rongji stretched her ears, she could only hear a few words, but she still sensitively found that these two words were, women. Forget it. This is the matter of big sister and madam. Let them be. Qin Wanru waved her hand and said casually. She turned her eyes to Qi Rongji and said, Miss Qi, is there anything else? This was an impolite way of asking a guest to leave. Knowing that Qin Wanru would not say anything to her, Qi Rongji snorted coldly. She stood up, looked at Qin Wanru proudly, and turned to leave. When she was at the door, she met Nanny Yu face to face. When she saw the big red invitation in Nanny Yu's hand, Qi Rongji decided that it was okay to sit down and have a look. So she turned back to the chair and sat down without hesitation. She said as if it was a matter of course, see which mansion sent the invitation. Is it an invitation for us to attend the banquet? It seems that my clothes will be ready soon. Qin Wanru ignored her talking to herself. She picked up the invitation and was stunned for a moment. It was from Duke Xing's mansion. Duke Xing's mansion had asked Rui, a great elder princess, to send an invitation to her. She had sent the invitation to her father, but her father had refused it. Where did this invitation come from? Qin Wanru frowned and asked. Nanny Duan brought some people here, and they are still outside. Nanny Yu pointed outside and said softly. Did this mean that the people were still here? Qin Wanru frowned slightly. For a moment, she could not understand why Duke Xing's mansion was so persistent. The people from Duke Xing's mansion are also here. That's great. Sister Wanru, please invite them in quickly. It's not good to neglect the distinguished guests. Chun Yi, please make a trip for Sister Wanru and invite them. Hearing Nanny Yu's words clearly, Chi Rongji stood up excitedly. She was overjoyed and made the decision on her own. Yes, I'll go right away. Hearing her words, Chun-Yi hurriedly walked out, but was stopped by Yu Jie at the door. Chapter 180. Qin Wanru had always wondered what kind of mentality Chi Rongji used to add fuel to the fire and give advice to Qin Yuru in the last life, and then watched her fall into the abyss of pain and despair with pleasure. Qin Wanru had no grudge against Chi Rongji. But now, she didn't want to know anymore. Some people were naturally frightened and malicious. As long as it wasn't her own, she could step on anyone else. Even if it was just for her, even if it was for her sake, she felt that it was only right. She slightly raised the corner of her mouth, and her eyes became colder. First Miss Chi, please. Chi Rongji didn't expect that Qin Wanru would not give her face at this time. She was so angry that her face turned pale and her lips trembled. Qin Wanru, how dare you, say such words? Why don't I dare? First Miss Chi, please recognize your situation and see clearly that this place belongs to Qin. Qin Wanru sneered and said lightly. Chi Rongji almost couldn't control her breath. But when she thought that there were people of Duke Xing's mansion outside the door, she gritted her teeth and endured it. Qin Wanru, don't be so sure. Maybe you will ask me for help in the future. Chi Rongji stamped her feet and threatened her with hatred. She had to turn around and leave. But when she reached the door, the anger on her face had disappeared. When the servant girl lifted the curtain, Chi Rongji appeared in front of everyone with a dignified and elegant look. She looked up at Nanny Duan standing in the corridor, walked over and greeted politely, Nanny Duan. Miss Chi. Nanny Duan hurriedly greeted her. Nanny Duan, why do you have time to visit Sister Wanru today? How is Madame Dowager? When I went to see Madame Dowager this morning, she hadn't gotten up yet. Chi Rongji said with a smile. Those who didn't know would really think that Chi Rongji respected Madame Dowager a lot. The morning she went to see Madame Dowager was actually a few days ago. Chi Rongji didn't meet Di Yan these days, so she got up early and wanted to meet Di Yan. For this reason, she specially went to Madame Dowager to say good morning. The reason was that a servant girl said that she saw Di Yan and Qin Yuru go to greet Madame Dowager together. Because she got up too early, old grandma was not up yet, so Chi Rongji hurried back to stop them. Although Nanny Duan did not know why Chi Rongji came to greet old grandma so early in the morning that day, she knew there must be something else when she saw Chi Rongji leave in a hurry and look absent-minded. Greeting old grandma was just an excuse. Miss Chi, old madam is in good health. When you came to pay your respects a few days ago, old madam was not up yet. I wanted to talk to you these few days, but I didn't expect you to be absent for the past few days. Chi Rongji looked at old madam and said, Miss Chi, old madam is in good health. Nanny Duan said with a smile. The displeasure in her eyes was hidden behind her smile. After working for old grandma for so many years, she had seen all kinds of people. She smiled at Chi Rongji's words, which did not match her heart, and said meaningfully. Chi Rongji's smile froze. This meant that she had not visited old grandma for so many days. But she reacted quickly and smiled again, as if she did not understand the meaning of Nanny Duan's words. She looked at an old maid beside Nanny Duan and said with a smile, I will talk to old grandma later. Nanny Duan, is she from the mansion? Why haven't I seen her before? After saying that, she looked the old maid up and down with a smile. This is a nanny of Duke Xing's mansion. She sent an invitation to our mansion, and old grandma asked me to bring her here. Nanny Duan answered. The banquet of Duke Xing's mansion. Sister Wanru and Sister Yuru will go there. That's great. After I came to the capital city, old grandma, Sister Yuru and Sister Wanru have been very kind to me. Sister Yuru was going to take me out last time, but I was sick. Now I have finally recovered. Chi Rongji's eyes lit up and she said with a smile. Nanny Duan did not know what to say. Miss Chi was really shameless. She said that as if she did not take her out this time, it would be bad to her. In front of the people of Duke Xing's mansion, Nanny Duan could not say no. She could only put on a superficial smile and said, Miss Qi is right. The old maid of Duke Xing's mansion looked her up and down and said with a smile, it's the best that Miss Qi can come. The invitation was rejected before, but it was really not known whether it would be accepted this time. The old maid of Duke Xing's mansion was actually very curious about what was wrong with her master and why she had to invite this family. It was just a family of officials who had just arrived in the capital city. With the status of Duke Xing's mansion, it was really unnecessary to be so accommodating. Just now in old grandma's place, old grandma repeatedly said that she was not in good health and might not be able to come, and the two madams in the mansion were also not in good health and could not go. As for the two misses, old grandma said it was better to ask them. Because they mainly invited the second Miss Qin, old grandma asked someone to bring her here. Although the miss in front of her was not the second Miss Qin, it seemed that she had a close relationship with the Qin family. If she went, the two misses of Qin's mansion would also go. Thinking in this way, the old maid of Duke Xing's mansion certainly agreed with a smile. After getting the words of the old maid of Duke Xing's mansion, Qi Rongji was very proud and her face became more and more pleasant. After nodding and agreeing, she went out of the courtyard with her servant girl. Standing at the gate of the courtyard and seeing the old maid of Duke Xing's mansion enter the room, she turned in the direction of the sewing room. She had new materials. When making clothes, she would embroider the embroidery patterns that Qin Wanru had sketched on them. She had to ask the people in the sewing room to work faster. It was the first time that she appeared in the capital city, so she had to amaze people with a brilliant feat with Qin Wanru on her side. It was not difficult. The old maid of Duke Xing's mansion followed Nanny Yu into the door. After entering the door, she saw a young miss sitting on the couch in the middle of the room. She looked so delicate that she almost came out of the painting, but she was not old and looked childish. If she grew up with such a look, she would be an extremely beautiful woman. She just sat there. Although she was small, she had an extraordinary bearing. There were two servant girls standing on each side quietly. At a glance, the old maid of Duke Xing's mansion felt that the miss in front of her could not be underestimated. While serving in the capital, he had seen many people, and all of them were sharp and intelligent. With one look, he could tell that this young lady was extraordinary. Her bearing and appearance were definitely one of the best, even if she was still a child. Even if she was just a child now, her future would be limitless. The old maid suddenly understood why her master invited this miss to the banquet again and again. Even if this miss refused, she specially sent her here. Even if she didn't say anything, her bearing was incomparable to that of the miss who just went out of the door. Or it could be said that there was no comparison at all. This is our second miss. Nanny Duan introduced on the side. The old maid hurriedly took 2 steps forward and bowed deeply to Qin Wanru. She behaved very respectfully and said, I pay my respects to second Miss Qin. You are? Qin Wanru looked up and down at the old maid and asked. I was sent by old madam of Duke Xing's mansion. I heard that second miss saved our master Hao and our old madam was very grateful, so she wanted to meet second miss and thank you in person. It happened that there was a banquet in the mansion, so she asked Rui and great elder princess to send the invitation card here. Unexpectedly, General Qin refused it. Old madam thought that this was the business of womenfolk, and there would be many misses in the mansion at that time. Second Miss Qin was at the right age, so she might like it more, so she asked me to go there again. The old maid of Duke Xing's mansion was very good at talking and very respectful. When she entered the door, she only glanced at Qin Wanru when she came in. After that, she had been well behaved and didn't even raise her head. Father's meaning. I am afraid that I am still young and I should not go out too much when I just arrived in the capital city, Qin Wanru said softly. Second miss, if you like quiet, you can go to old madam's place to have a chat. Old madam just wants to thank second miss and see what second miss who can save master Hao looks like. I heard that you are also a child, so old madam wants to thank you even more. The old maid replied cleverly. Obviously, she had prepared these words long ago, and her words were very pleasing. But grandmother and mother are not going. I am afraid that it is not appropriate for me to go. Qin Wanru refused calmly. Not only second miss, but also first miss and Miss Chi just now. I heard that these misses have just arrived in the capital city. It is also an opportunity to attend the banquet together and chat with the misses in the capital city. You can't not be with them because you are not familiar with the misses in the capital city. The old maid said with a smile and even borrowed Qi Rongji's influence. Although she didn't know Qi Rongji's identity, she just saw that Qi Rongji's words and deeds showed an unusual relationship with Qin's mansion. Of course, she would use her as a topic. This. Qin Wanru hesitated. Miss, you should go. First Miss has been in the capital city for a period of time and knows a lot of people. If she takes you there, she will definitely take good care of you. Yu Jia also persuaded on the side. Yes, miss, you should go. There is nothing to do in the mansion all day long. You should associate with the misses from other mansions. Maybe you can find some good friends and have a good relationship with them in the future. Qing Yu also persuaded. The words of the old maid of Duke Xing's mansion just now were deeply rooted in people's hearts. Hearing what the two servant girls said, Qin Wanru seemed to be a little moved. After thinking for a while, she finally pushed this topic away. Nanny, since big sister is leading the team, can you go to ask her? If she thinks she can go, then go. If she thinks she can't go, then forget it. Qin Wanru said as if she was following Qin Yuru's lead. Then please lead the way, Nanny Duan. When the old maid of Duke Xing's mansion came over, she knew that second Miss Qin might not be willing. Otherwise, she would not have returned the invitation card. Now seeing that Qin Wanru had been moved, she immediately said to Nanny Duan with a smile. When first Miss Qin came here, the mansion had already sent a message. It was said that first Miss Qin liked bustling and should be willing to go. Thank you, Nanny Duan. Qin Wanru turned to Nanny Duan and said softly. Then I will take her to see first Miss. Nanny Duan responded. After saying goodbye to Qin Wanru, she led people out. Chapter 181. The invitation to attend the banquet in Duke Xing's mansion was settled. Duke Xing's mansion sent the invitation card again and invited them with great sincerity, so Qin Huayong and Madame Dowager couldn't refuse it again. Duke Xing's mansion was different from Duke Yong's mansion. Although the current Duke Xing didn't have many achievements, the last two generations of Duke Xing were important ministers of the emperor. Madame D definitely couldn't go, but Shui Rulan was not pregnant yet, so she could go. Qin Huayong and Madame Dowager discussed it and decided to let Shui Rulan take Qin Yuru and Qin Wanru. Because Qi Rongji showed up before and talked with the old maid of Duke Xing's mansion, it was not good to not take her. This was the official appearance of the two misses of Qin's mansion together. Madame Dowager attached great importance to it and specially invited two etiquette instructors to train them on etiquette and behavior at this kind of banquet. Although it was not the first time for them to show up together in the capital city and amaze everyone, at least they could behave decently and look like sisters. Madame Dowager was very disappointed with Qin Yuru now, like Qin Huayong. But anyway, she was Qin Huayong's biological daughter, so she couldn't let her go like this. She had to teach her well. Madame Dowager was very satisfied with Nanny Huang who taught Qin Yuru. After telling them, she asked them to learn etiquette in her own yard even without coming to pay respects these days. Seeing that Qin Yuru and Qin Wanru were both taught by etiquette instructors, Qi Rongji also wanted to teach etiquette instructors. She went to tell Madame Dowager that she also wanted to learn etiquette with Qin Yuru. She hoped that Nanny Huang could teach Qin Yuru with her. If it was not convenient, she could watch by herself. Since Nanny Huang had said so, Madame Dowager naturally couldn't let her watch by the side. She asked someone to take her to Qin Yuru's yard and let Nanny Huang teach her. A few days passed by in the blink of an eye. Early in the morning, all of the masters of the Qin mansion woke up. Even the old madam woke up early. When she saw that her two granddaughters were dressed up properly, a trace of a smile appeared on her face. She was very satisfied with their attire. They looked like sisters who were very close. Chin Yuru was dressed in a light blue gown and a light purple long skirt with 8 stripes. She had a belt around her waist. Her black hair was combed up, and 3 strings of bright and round beads were hanging down from the hairpin she had picked up, which made her look even more beautiful and charming. Today, Chi Rongji was wearing a light yellow dress. It was a pleated skirt embroidered with silver threads. The hem of the skirt was embellished with pearls. It was fitting and beautiful. When the wind blew, the hem of the skirt fluttered slightly. She was as beautiful as a dream. She was dressed especially charmingly today. Although she was only 13 years old, she had already dressed up like a 15 or 16-year-old girl. Standing beside Chin Yuru, she looked more like a pair of sisters. Chin Wanru's style of dressing was different from theirs. She wore a light pink coat and a skirt that changed from light pink to light white. She was not tall and looked young. Her black hair was tied up in 2 buns and inserted with 2 butterfly hairpins. The 2 hairpins were inserted into her black hair, which made her look more delicate. Seeing that they were well dressed, Madame Dowager nodded with satisfaction. She told them some things that they needed to pay attention to and then let Shui Rulin take them away. Are the embroidery patterns on their clothes the same? Why do they look so familiar? After they left, Madame Dowager murmured and asked. I also think they look familiar, but I can't recognize them. Although the embroidery patterns of the 3 misses are similar, they are not exactly the same. Maybe the sewing room found the patterns according to the different temperaments of the 3 misses. Nanny Duan said with a smile. Maybe. Madame Dowager smiled and also thought this was the most likely answer. The clothes of the 3 misses were all newly made. Even Chi Rongji's clothes were made by the sewing room. It was possible that the 3 sets of clothes had something in common. Moreover, it was not bad. The clothes of the 3 misses looked similar, which made people think that the sisters of the Qin's mansion were harmonious and had a good relationship with Chi Rongji. Now there were some rumors outside, which were all about Madame D and Chin Yuru. These words were not pleasant to hear. Nanny Duan had mentioned it to Madame Dowager in private several times. If they could go out this time, they could let others see that the sisters of Qin's mansion were harmonious and didn't fight with each other with their faces swollen. There were 2 carriages prepared by the Qin's mansion. Of course, Qin Wanru was in one carriage with Shui Rulin, while Qin Yuru and Chi Rongji went to the carriage behind. When they all got on the carriage moved slowly. One after another, they left the Qin's mansion and went to Duke Xing's mansion. Duke Xing's mansion was far from the Qin's mansion, which was the real center of the capital city. The house of the Qin's mansion was left by the ancestors. Although it was good, it was still on the periphery of the capital city. Along the way, they almost passed through several busy streets. Qin Wanru asked Yujie to pull down the curtain and sat by the window to watch with relish. Wanru. Shui Rulin looked at Qin Wanru and wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Mother, what do you want to say? Qin Wanru turned around and asked with a smile. Go to Duke Xing's mansion later and don't run around. Shui Rulin said softly. Duke Xing's mansion sent invitation cards again and again, which made her feel uneasy. She was not an important family, but Duke Xing's mansion attached too much importance to her. Mother, I'm fine. Be careful in case someone offends you. Qin Wanru saw Shui Rulin's worry and immediately said with a smile. Before going out this time, Qin Wanru specially asked Madame Dowager to assign 2 strong old maids to Shui Rulin, just in case of any accidents. I know. I won't go anywhere at that time. I'll just stay in the room and talk with those madams. Before coming here, Shui Rulin had already thought about what she would do next. Originally, she wanted to show her face with Qin Yuru and Qin Yuru to show that there were elders with them. Otherwise, it would be very impolite for 2 girls to come here for the first time. Mother, if someone asks about Madame D later, what will you say? Qin Wanru said with a smile. She could be sure that someone would ask about this later, so she should give Shui Rulan a good foundation first. Her words made Shui Rulan silent for a while. After thinking for a while, she said indifferently, "She is ill." "Why is she ill?" Qin Wanru continued to ask with a smile. "She is not acclimatized to the climate." Shui Rulan laughed. After saying this, Qin Wanru also burst into laughter. Madame D's injury really couldn't be mentioned. Could it be said that Madame D and Qin Huayong fought and hurt herself, or that she was poured medicine on her hands and scalded her face? Although such a statement was ridiculous, it was Madame D who was ridiculous. Even if the people of Duke Yong's mansion were here, they would not come out to refute. "Mother, if they ask about you, what will you say?" Qin Wanru reached out to hold Shui Rulan's hand and said softly. The fact that Shui Rulan had married and became a widow couldn't be hidden at all. How could Madame D not spread this out? "They won't ask me face to face, will they?" The smile on Shui Rulan's face faded, and she hesitated and said, "Mother, I think they will." Qin Wanru looked at Shui Rulan seriously and said, "There were some things that couldn't be avoided. Someone would definitely pick out this kind of embarrassing question. Blindly avoiding the problem couldn't solve the problem at all." Qin Wanru didn't want Shui Rulan to be suppressed when she just dated a madam of an aristocratic family in the capital city. If Madame D didn't come, this would be the best opportunity. Shui Rulan's eyes fell on Qin Wanru's face. Qin Wanru's small and delicate face was tight, which made her look like a little adult. Her snow-white skin and red lips all showed that she was still a child, but this child was worried about Shui Rulan in every way. "Wanru, don't worry. Even if they talk about this in front of me, I won't care." Shui Rulan was not stupid. She touched Qin Wanru's temples and said gently. No matter how bad she was still an adult. "Mother, I will follow you then." Qin Wanru rolled her watery eyes and said with a pun. "It doesn't matter. You can play by yourself for a while." Shui Rulan smiled helplessly. This child was really worried. She was at the age where she liked to play the most. It was really restricting her to follow her all the time. Although Shui Rulan was worried about her, she couldn't really restrict her to death. "Mother, I have no place to go to play. Let big sister and Miss Chi go to play. They look more like sisters." Qin Wanru said meaningfully. When they got on the car just now, they were so modest that people who didn't know the truth would really think that they were biological sisters. "Then follow me." Shui Rulan was actually worried about Qin Wanru. She thought for a while and said. She had a lot of doubts about the matter that Duke Xing's mansion repeatedly sent invitation cards to Qin Wanru. She had talked about it with Madame Dowager before, but because she didn't know whether there was such a practice in the capital city, she couldn't figure out the meaning of Duke Xing's mansion for a while. If Duke Xing's mansion really appreciated and valued the child so much, they could directly come to thank Qin Wanru. Why did they have to invite Wanru over and put on a very grateful look? Shui Rulan had a feeling that since Duke Xing's mansion had sent invitation cards one after another, Wanru would not be so low-key at today's banquet. Looking at the small face in front of her, Shui Rulan frowned. She was still a child. Was it really good to appear in front of everyone in such a high profile? At that time, she would take one step at a time and must carefully protect this child. Shui Rulan secretly made up her mind. Before they arrived at the gate of Duke Xing's mansion, the road had been blocked. There were carriages coming in front of them, blocking all the way forward. It could be seen that there were many people attending the banquet in Duke Xing's mansion today. In this situation, the whole circle of dignitaries in the capital city might be mobilized. Duke Xing's mansion was still as prosperous as in her previous life. Even if it was not a royal family, its honor was not comparable to other families. Chapter 182. We are. The coachman looked at the old maid who asked the question and said. They are really from Qin's mansion. Then follow me. Let's go that way. There are fewer people there. Seeing that she found them, the old maid of Duke Xing's mansion was very happy and reached out to lead them to the side. She had asked many carriages along the way, and they all said that they were not from Qin's mansion. Now that she found them, she naturally led them in according to the request of the mansion. Let's go. Shui Rulan said to the coachman outside. The coachman hurriedly turned the horse around and turned to a road on the side. There was also a side door, but obviously not everyone could enter that side door. The gate was very crowded, but this side door was not. Seeing the two carriages passing by, some madams and ladies who had been waiting also looked at them and were guessing their identities. Some of them had guessed it, and some of them hadn't. The carriage followed the old maid into the side door, and then came to a place after turning all the way. The carriage stopped. Qianghua and Yujia lifted the curtain and let Shui Rulan and Qin Wanru get off the carriage. Behind them, Qin Yuru and Qi Rongji also got off. The spacious parking lot was neat and surrounded by tall trees. There were only a few carriages parked here. Just by looking at the appearance of these carriages, one could tell that they were not used by ordinary manners. Every carriage was spacious and gorgeous. The Qin residence's carriage was originally not bad, but when it stopped at the side, it immediately looked a little shabby and small. Qin Wanru frowned. The gate was so crowded, and there were so many carriages. It seemed that they were not parked here. Madam Qin, Miss Qin, please come with me. Our madam has been waiting for you for a long time. The old maid said with a smile and reached out to lead the way. Your madam? Shui Rulan turned her eyes and asked. Our madam is Madam of Duke Xing. She has been waiting for you for a long time. The old maid smiled with a friendly attitude. Shui Rulan looked at Qin Wanru, and Qin Wanru nodded silently. They just followed the old maid and walked forward together. The first impression that Duke Xing's mansion gave Qin Wanru was that it was so big that she couldn't even reach the end of it. However, the layout seemed to be a little different. The place where they came from before was dominated by tall trees, while the middle section was dominated by flowers and plants. Now the section they were walking through was dominated by the elegant charm of the south of the Yangtze River. Seeing such different styles in one mansion, it could be seen that Duke Xing's mansion was prosperous. Gradually, they met more and more people. Most of them walked along the same road, and no one led them. On the contrary, the old maid of Duke Xing's mansion led the way in front of Qin Wanru and her entourage. She whispered respectfully from time to time, as if she was introducing something. For a time, many madams and misses turned their eyes to them. They were all guessing who they were and why Duke Xing's mansion treated them like this. Qin Yuru and Qi Rongji liked the feeling of being the center of attention. They followed Shui Rulan with a gentle and dignified look. At first glance, they really looked like a pair of sisters. These two beautiful and decent-looking sisters naturally attracted a lot of attention. Under everyone's gaze, they entered a flower hall. There were already a lot of people in the flower hall. At this time, many people were laughing and talking. One of the madams in the middle was Madam of Duke Xing. She was not particularly beautiful, but her manners and behavior made people feel comfortable. She was also kind to others. It seemed that no matter what you said, she would listen to you wholeheartedly. It wasn't easy for someone of her status to do this. While greeting the guests, she listened to others talking and said something with a smile from time to time. Every time she said something to the point. Everyone felt that Madam of Duke Xing was slick and could handle things with ease. Besides, she had the best temper and character. An old maid hurriedly came over and whispered in her ear. The smile on her face became wider. She stood up happily and said, "Second Miss Qin is here. Hurry up and invite her over." She ordered softly. Second Miss Qin. Several madams sitting around her were stunned for a moment. They didn't understand who this second Miss Qin was and why she made Madam of Duke Xing so happy. Who is second Miss Qin? A madam couldn't help asking. I don't know. I don't know either. I don't know. Everyone guessed that it was a famous noble lady in the capital city, but they didn't think there was such a person. Madame of Duke Xing didn't gossip with them and followed the old maid to welcome them. Seeing that Madame of Duke Xing welcomed them in person, everyone was too surprised. The crowd involuntarily separated to two sides, revealing Shui Rulin and others who had just stepped into the door. The huge flower hall immediately became quiet, and everyone's eyes fell on them. As soon as they entered the hall, they became the focus of everyone's attention. Qin Wanru frowned slightly. Was Duke Xing's mansion going to build momentum for her or for themselves? Compared with building momentum for herself, she was more willing to believe that it was the latter. At this time, Madame of Duke Xing came over with several servant girls and old maids. The old maid who led the way before introduced with a smile, "This is our Madame of Duke Xing." "Madam, this is second Miss Qin." The old maid pointed at Qin Wanru. Madame of Duke Xing's eyes fell on Qin Wanru's face kindly, and she smiled kindly. Then she turned to Shui Rulin and said, "Madame Shui, you finally come. Please come in." Madame of Duke Xing called Shui Rulin's surname directly. It seemed that she had also inquired about Shui Rulin. Although Shui Rulin had never seen such a scene, she also calmed down at this time. She bowed deeply to Madame of Duke Xing, and then said politely, "Thank you, Madam." Madame of Duke Xing warmly made way for them all the way, and even led several people to move forward. It could be seen that the madam sitting in the front seat had a higher status. Shui Rulin followed after a few steps and stopped. "Madame of Duke Xing, let's sit on the side. It's not appropriate for us to go there." "It's not appropriate. If second Miss Qin hadn't saved Hao, he would have been in trouble this time. I took him to Rui and great elder princess's mansion. If something really happened, I couldn't absolve myself from the blame." The smile on Madame of Duke Xing's face became more and more kind and touching. When she turned to Qin Wanru, there was a kind of kindness in her eyes. "Madam, you are too serious." Wanru just helped him conveniently. Shui Rulin said softly. She was neither humble nor arrogant and looked very natural, but she didn't move anymore. Madame of Duke Xing was polite to her because of the identity of Qin's mansion. But if Shui Rulin didn't know what to do and really followed them, she would be a little embarrassed. Second Miss Qin is smart and kind. What a good girl. She looks so good. I like her at first sight. I will give her to you. Seeing that Shui Rulin didn't move, Madame of Duke Xing didn't force her. She also stopped, turned around and looked Qin Wanru up and down carefully. After nodding repeatedly, she took off a pair of bracelets from her wrist, walked over, picked up Qin Wanru's hand, and was about to put them on for her. The bracelet was just taken off from her hand. Not to mention that the bracelet was clear and it was obviously valuable, the way she took off the bracelet directly had made Qin Wanru feel extremely honored. Qin Wanru stepped back calmly, but her hand was held by Shui Rulin and she couldn't step back for a while. She could only look up at Shui Rulin with a very embarrassed look. "Madame of Duke Xing, how can you do this? She is just a child. How can she accept such a valuable gift?" Shui Rulin hurried over to stop her. "Madame Shui, don't mind it. It is just a bracelet. I think this child is really destined to wear it and I like her very much." Madame of Duke Xing put the bracelets on Qin Wanru's hand. The bracelets were too big, and her hand was too small. After shaking for a while, she almost fell off. Shui Rulin was so scared that she reached out to hold her hand hurriedly. Madame of Duke Xing is so polite. Wanru thanks Madame of Duke Xing. Since the bracelets had been put on, it seemed a little impolite to take them off at this time. Shui Rulin said helplessly. "Thank you, Madame of Duke Xing." Qin Wanru smiled slightly, stepped forward naturally and bowed to Madame of Duke Xing. Then she took off the bracelets, which were so wide that they were about to fall off, handed them to Yujie beside her, and deliberately lowered her voice to tell her to put them away carefully. Her actions were as smooth as floating clouds and flowing water. She had both the calmness of a miss from an aristocratic family and a little childish, which was very similar to her current age. Originally, many people thought that Madame of Duke Xing favored a miss whom they had never heard of, and they were not happy in their hearts. Now seeing this, several people laughed. She was a child. Although it was appropriate, she was just a child after all. At this time, some people who knew what happened in Rui and great elder princess's mansion had quietly spread the news. For a moment, almost everyone present knew that this was the savior of the little devil of Duke Xing's mansion. No wonder Madame of Duke Xing thought so highly of her. It turned out that it was because of this. However, Duke Xing's mansion really did a good job. They actually gave such a little girl such a big face. You're welcome. Do you want to go to the garden to have a look first? There are many kinds of chrysanthemums in the garden, and some of them are treasures from the palace. Madame of Duke Xing said with a smile. Most of the young misses in the flower hall were madams, and few of them stayed here. Basically, they all went to enjoy the flowers. Madame of Duke Xing said, glancing at Qin Yuru and Qi Rongji, and then sliding her eyes over the corners of their skirts. She suddenly smiled in her heart, but her smile was as gentle as ever. Thank you, Madame of Duke Xing. But I'd better sit here. Yuru, Wanru, Miss Qi, how about you? Shui Rulin said. She had been very tired all the way, and she really didn't want to move at this time. I'll stay with you. Wanru and sister Rongji go to play. Qin Yuru finally got such an opportunity to show off, and immediately showed a dignified expression and said. This was taught by Nanny Huang, but in fact, she really didn't want to sit here with Shui Rulin. Big sister, you go to play. I'm tired, and I'll sit here with my mother for a while. Qin Wanru pulled Shui Rulin's sleeves and said with a bit of a coquettish tone. She shook her sleeves, and the embroidered patterns of orchids were displayed in front of Madame of Duke Xing. Chapter 183. Yuru, go for a walk with Miss Qi. If Wanru doesn't want to go out, she can accompany me. Shui Rulin said with a smile. Qin Yuru breathed a deep sigh of relief. She was really afraid that Shui Rulin would insist on asking her to stay. If that happened, she would be unlucky. It was not easy for her to have such a chance to be in the limelight, and she couldn't waste it in vain. Although she was happy, she had to pretend to be reluctant. After hesitating for a while, she said meekly, yes. Qi Rongji also behaved very well today. Before going down with Qin Yuru, she even specially bowed to Shui Rulin, and then followed Qin Yuru out. Both of them were good-looking and behaved appropriately. They were of the same height, and each of them had their own charm, which attracted the attention of a group of madams. They secretly inquired about who they were and whether they had ever been engaged. Qin Wanru followed Shui Rulin to sit in the seat led by the old maid, and she sat beside Shui Rulin. Madame of Duke Xing went to entertain other guests, but she was afraid that the two of them would feel unfamiliar for the first time since they came here, so she deliberately asked the smart old maid who had led the way to stay. Not far away from them, Countess Yong glanced at them coldly with a faint smile, and said something to several madams around her. Immediately, those madams looked at Shui Rulin with a little sarcasm on their faces. A widow remarried. They thought she was a big shot, but unexpectedly Madame of Duke Xing welcomed her at the door. She didn't know whether she had such a good fortune. These madams all boasted that they were born noble, so how could they take a fancy to a remarried widow, especially when Madame of Duke Xing valued her so much just now. When they came in, they were not so grand. His eyes fell on Qin Wanru with a bit of sarcasm. Could she be a burden and come here with me? Two servant girls came over with 2 large fruit basins. They respectfully put down 2 large fruit basins in front of Shui Rulin, and then said, Madam Shui, our madam is afraid that you are not used to the fruits in the capital city. Here are some specialties of Jiangzhou. But it is a little far away, so I am afraid that some are not fresh. Thank your madam for me. Shui Rulin frowned and said softly. Qin Wanru didn't answer. She looked at Madame of Duke Xing through the crowd, with a faint and cold smile on her lips. Madame of Duke Xing had repeatedly expressed her intention in front of so many people. It seemed that Madame of Duke Xing didn't mean it out of kindness. She saw that when Madame of Duke Xing saw the bluegrass pattern on their clothes, although the smile on her face remained unchanged, her eyes narrowed. Did it mean that Madame of Duke Xing knew this pattern? Or did she know about the seal? Today, her embroidery pattern was similar to Qin Yuru's and Qi Rongji's. However, Qin Yuru's pattern was the most similar, followed by her. Qi Rongji's pattern was slightly modified, and her pattern was the least similar. Overall, the three embroidery patterns were very similar. However, Qin Yuru's embroidery pattern was authentic, while hers and Qi Rongji's embroidery pattern were fakes. However, since there were fakes, naturally the authentic one was extremely outstanding. She blinked her watery eyes slightly and looked forward to seeing what would happen today. If this seal was really related to Duke Xing's mansion, something would definitely happen at today's banquet. I heard that Madame Shui is a remarried woman. Madame of Duke Xing's repeated displays of goodwill finally annoyed these noble madams, especially those who had been in Duke Yong's mansion and were close to them. At this moment, a madam craned her head out, looked at Shui Rulin and asked with a faint smile, and the disdain on her lips could not be concealed. Because Shui Rulin had been prepared in her heart, she nodded naturally and said, "Indeed. Madame Shui is so lucky." The madam covered her mouth with a handkerchief and said sarcastically. A remarried woman really thought of herself as a big shot. My mother is indeed lucky, but she has a good heart. Qin Wanru had seen all this. Looking at the few madams around her who were talking in twos and threes, she raised her face and said with a smile, "If it weren't for taking care of me, my mother would have wanted to spend the rest of her life in a nunnery lamp." Since these words had been revealed, she should reveal more. Many madams around her did not understand what she said and felt confused. After looking Qin Wanru up and down for a few times, another madam asked curiously, "What do you mean by taking care of you? Doesn't your father have other wives?" They just heard from several madams around Countess Yong that this Qin's mansion was the Qin's mansion where Madame D of Duke Yong's mansion married. My father naturally has Madame D, but Madame D has to take care of Big Sister, the affairs of the courtyard and some shops, so she can't spare time to take care of me. So my father and Madame discussed it and asked my mother to come into the mansion to take care of me. Qin Wanru smiled slightly and explained. She only took care of her own daughter and didn't take care of another girl. Couldn't spare time. These were all excuses, and no one could understand it. Madame D was unwilling to take care of other people's children, so she let such a widow marry into the mansion. But it didn't seem like it. Even if they had not encountered this kind of thing, they must have heard of it. How could she let her husband marry another child in order to take care of a concubine's child? This was a co-wife, not an ordinary concubine or concubine, who couldn't be dealt with at will. Who would find such a big opponent for herself? Looking at Shui Rulin's extraordinary appearance, everyone felt confused, and someone even secretly looked at Countess Yong's face. There must be something they didn't know. Countess Yong didn't expect that Qin Wanru would say such words on this occasion, and her face turned red with anger, but she also knew that it was not a good time to say more at this time. The matter of Shui Rulin marrying into the mansion couldn't be exposed. It was said that there were witnesses missing. If they really exposed it, it would definitely be a big deal. Originally, she just wanted to use the momentum of Madame of Duke Xing to secretly provoke a few words, so that those madams, who had always thought themselves superior, couldn't bear to stir up trouble, but she didn't expect that they would stir up trouble again. Tilting her face to the side, she simply pretended not to hear it. "Does it mean that your mother didn't know your father before?" Another madam said in a sarcastic tone. Shui Rulin's face changed slightly. When she was about to answer, Qin Wanru held her hand and said, "My father naturally knew my mother. Since they knew each other early, how could they take care of each other? Could it be that they took care of each other for marrying into the mansion?" Obviously, the lady was a sharp-tongued one. She sneered and raised her chin high to look at Shui Rulan. The provocation was obvious. What do you mean, madam? Qin Wanru blinked her watery eyes, and her eyes became cold. Although she just looked like a child, her momentum made the low whispers around her quiet. Nothing. I just asked out of curiosity. Second miss, you are still a child and don't understand. There are many people in this world who take advantage of others. If you are not careful, you will be taken as a reason by others. The madam said disdainfully, which meant that Qin Wanru was cheated by Shui Rulan. It was clear that Shui Rulan had colluded with Qin Huayong before, but she used taking care of her as a reason. Countess Yong smiled, raised her eyebrows, and continued to pretend that she didn't hear it. Madam of Duke Xing, who was not far away, also smiled very happily and gently talked about some trivial matters with another madam. She didn't know anything about this side. Madam, if you don't believe it, you can go to Jiangzhou to inquire about it. The whole Jiangzhou knows about it. Are the people in the whole Jiangzhou less knowledgeable than madam? Qin Wanru said unhurriedly and raised her voice a little. Countess Yong's face stiffened, and the smile on her face became much lighter. She couldn't keep it. The madam choked for a moment and blushed for a moment. You are just a child. What do you know? Don't you know that you have been cheated? Madam, you really worry too much. You take care of a child so much. It's really admirable. Shui Rulan gently pinched Qin Wanru's hand and raised her sparkling eyes. She looked at the mean madam with her sparkling eyes. It was obvious that she wanted to bully Qin Wanru in the end, but Shui Rulan said that she took care of Qin Wanru. The mean madam's face became redder and redder. Unexpectedly, the mother and daughter were sharper than the other. What's wrong? What happened? The gentle voice of Madam of Duke Xing came over. Looking at Madam of Duke Xing, who came over a little anxiously, Qin Wanru's eyes became a little watery. If she didn't hear such a big noise, Madam of Duke Xing would pretend too much. Nothing. We just talked about it for fun. A madam came out to smooth things over. Madam Shui, are you really all right? Madam of Duke Xing's eyes fell on Shui Rulan and asked with concern. I'm fine. It's just that some madams have some questions. If there are any madams who are curious about it, you can ask me directly. Wanru is still young and ignorant. If I say something wrong, I hope madams can forgive me. Shui Rulan stood up naturally, bowed slightly to the surrounding people, and then sat down again. It's good that you are fine. It's good that you are fine. Second miss is such a well-behaved child. How could anyone offend her? Madam of Duke Xing said with a smile. Her face relaxed, and her words became more and more pleasant. She seemed to be kind and harmonious. No matter whether her identity was noble or not, she treated everyone like Qin Wanru. However, Qin Wanru turned her eyes away from Madam of Duke Xing's face indifferently. No matter in the last life or this life, Madam of Duke Xing had always been smooth and slick. Only when she talked to Qin Wanru in private would she reveal her disgust. Was it a cover-up of disgust? Chapter 184. After saying this, Madam of Duke Xing seemed to realize that she had made a mistake. She scolded in a low voice, "What do you mean by fighting again? Master Hao has just returned to the mansion. Most of the people who come to the mansion today are womenfolk. Who did he fight with this time? Did you make a mistake?" "Madam, you didn't make a mistake. It is really Master Hao." The old maid was so anxious that her forehead was covered with sweat. She leaned over and whispered a few words in Madam of Duke Xing's ear. Madam of Duke Xing looked at Qin Wanru with a shocked face. Qin Wanru raised her head and met the surprised eyes of the people of Guild of Duke Xing. She blinked and lowered her head with a confused look. After the initial shock, Madam of Duke Xing had calmed down again at this time. She came over and said to Shui Rulan, "Madam Shui, accompany me for a walk." Knowing that she had something to say, Shui Rulan nodded and stood up. Madams, I have something to do. I will accompany you later. Madam of Duke Xing said politely to the madams. Madam, please help yourself. Everyone was also very polite. Madam Shui, please come with me. When turning to Shui Rulan, Madam of Duke Xing looked a little serious. After saying that, she left first, and Shui Rulan followed closely. Seeing that there was something going on, the rest of the madams followed out. A large group of people walked back along the corridor. Coming out from the flower hall, there were pots of chrysanthemums on the road, which were very delicate and beautiful. However, no one was in the mood to appreciate them at this time. They just hurriedly followed the footsteps of Madam of Duke Xing. Madam of Duke Xing also seemed to be anxious and did not notice that many madams were following her all the way. The group of people turned to a moon cave door. Before they arrived, they heard the loud noise over there. Madam of Duke Xing's face changed dramatically, and her footsteps became faster and faster. Not far in front of them, Qin Yuru sat on a stone bench on one side with a very ugly face. She looked very embarrassed. The hem of her elegant long dress had been poured with something, and it was black. At first glance, it was obvious that she could not wear it. Upon a closer look, not only the skirt, but also half of the sleeves were pulled down. Fortunately, most of the people who came today were family members, and there were no men. Otherwise, Qin Yuru's reputation would be damaged. Opposite her, Xiao Yuanhao was also embarrassed. He sat on the ground, crying and throwing a tantrum, and the two servants beside him could not stop him. Qi Rongji stood a few steps away from Qin Yuru, and looked a little worried. But when she slightly raised her chin, Qin Wanru could still see a smile on her face. What happened? Madam of Duke Xing came over and said in a deep voice. Master Hao refuses to get up. He wants this young lady to apologize to him, or he won't get up. An old maid said on the side with sweat all over her head. How, what's wrong? Madam of Duke Xing walked to Xiao Yuanhao, who was still crying, squatted down and coaxed him softly. Madam, she, ran, madam, aunt, and, madam, Xiao, in re, I, how, and, madam, she bumped into me, pushed me, and spilled ink on me. I hate her, and I want her to apologize to me. Xiao Yuanhao said loudly, pointing at Qin Yuru. It seemed that he had a good temper, and continued to coax this overbearing child. Madam of Duke Xing seemed to have a very good temper. She continued to coax this little bully. Many madams could not help frowning and felt that after returning to the mansion, they must warn their children not to play with this little bully. This kind of rude and troublesome behavior was really not pleasing to the eye. In the crowd, Qin Wanru's watery eyes moved slightly, and her eyes fell on Madam of Duke Xing's face, which looked too gentle. Even if he was her child, her behavior was too much. Even if Xiao Yuanhao was a little young, the children of aristocratic families usually went to school at an early age. There were many children of his age who were good at studying, but did not seem to have learned anything. Thinking of Xiao Yuanhao's threatening look when they met for the first time, Qin Wanru felt more suspicious. Hearing Madam of Duke Xing's words, Xiao Yuanhao stood up with Madam of Duke Xing's servants, walked to Qin Yuru aggressively, raised his head high, and said loudly, "Apologize to me. I am Master Hao of Duke Xing's mansion." This kind of child was really unlikable. Qin Wanru really could not associate this overbearing and rude child with Hao, who had clung to her at that time. With so many people seeing her like this, Qin Yuru's eyes turned red. Being scolded by a child, she immediately cried. Mei Shui hurriedly reached out to hold her, and her eyes also turned red. She sobbed and said, "First miss, please don't cry. If you cry again, I can't bear it anymore." The master and the servant cried bitterly in each other's arms. In addition, Xiao Yuanhao was arrogant in front of them. If Xiao Yuanhao was not a little young, this scene would be a drama of a bully child robbing a girl, which was so annoying. Many madams looked at Xiao Yuanhao with more disdain. This was a useless playboy. When he grew up, he would just be a playboy in the capital city. Look at him, he did this kind of thing at such a young age, and he seemed to take it for granted. It was really unlikable. Be good. Look, she is crying. Forgive her. Madame of Duke Xing walked over and touched Xiao Yuanhao's head gently. He touched Xiao Yuanhao's head and smiled. She did not say right or wrong, or even the cause and effect of the matter. But looking at the scene, everyone felt that Xiao Yuanhao was unreasonable, and Qin Yuru and her servant were a pair who had been wronged. Humph, for the sake of second aunt, I will forgive you this time. Next time I meet you, I will not forgive you. Xiao Yuanhao raised his little face very proudly. Go back first. Second aunt will deal with the matter here. Madame of Duke Xing said as she winked at the two servants following her. The two servants came over, took Xiao Yuanhao's hands on each side, and coaxed him to leave. After he left, Madame of Duke Xing walked to Qin Yuru and asked, Miss Qin, are you hurt? It is all my fault that Miss Qin has been wronged. I will come to apologize to you in the future. Qin Yuru bit her lip, pushed Mei Shui away, and bowed to Madame of Duke Xing with red eyes. She was a junior, and her status was far lower than Madame of Duke Xing. Yuru, what is going on? Shui Rulan also came over and asked. Just a bump. Qin Yuru's tears fell down again, and she lifted the corner of her dress. The big piece of ink should be the ink just now. Just a bump, why is it so serious? Qin Wanru also came over and helped her to lift the corner of her dress, which was full of ink. After looking around, she saw a small bucket overturned on the ground, and there was still some ink in it. What was Xiao Yuanhao going to do with such a big bucket of ink? First, Miss Qin, I asked someone to change clothes for you first. I am really sorry for what happened today, and I hope Madame Shui can forgive me. I am really sorry. Madame of Duke Xing said with embarrassment. Since things had become so serious, Shui Rulan couldn't blame Madame of Duke Xing now, and she also said politely. Madame of Duke Xing arranged someone to take Qin Yuru to change clothes, and Qin Wanru volunteered to go with them. Qi Rongji originally didn't want to go, but seeing that both of them went, she said that she would accompany them. The three of them followed a servant girl of Duke Xing's mansion. The servant girl took them all the way to a yard, walked into a wing room, and asked them to wait for a moment, and then brought a set of clothes. When this set of clothes was brought, not only Qi Rongji's eyes lit up, but also Qin Yuru's eyes lit up. It was very gorgeous, far better than the one Qin Yuru wore today, with pearl hemming and gold thread. The embroidery on it looked exquisite and gorgeous, and the light gauze felt delicate. At first glance, Qin Yuru felt that she liked this set of clothes, and she couldn't help feeling overjoyed. This is our first Mrs. Yard, and first Miss is not here. When we came here just now, Madam asked me to bring a set of first Mrs. clothes for first Miss Qin to change into. The nanny in charge said that first Miss Qin hasn't worn this set of clothes after it was made, and she hoped that first Miss Qin would like it. The servant girl said with a smile. Qi Rongji now wished that she was the one who had an accident at that time. Such a set of clothes, even 4 or 5 sets of hers couldn't compare to this set of clothes. Sister Yuru, when you left the mansion, did you bring clothes? Qi Rongji touched it for a few times reluctantly and said unwillingly. She didn't, and for the best, Qin Yuru didn't. When misses from aristocratic families attended banquets, they usually brought an extra set of clothes, in case of accidents. I didn't bring it today. Qin Yuru lowered her head and said. First Miss Qin, if you don't mind, please put it on. The servant girl said with a smile, as if she didn't understand the meaning of Qi Rongji and Qin Yuru's words. Qin Wanru smiled slightly and walked out of the door without saying anything, and Yujie hurried to catch up with her. Seeing that they all went out, Qi Rongji followed them out reluctantly, leaving Qin Yuru alone in the room to change clothes. What on earth happened? Why is Big Sister's clothes dirty, but Miss Qi's clothes are not dirty? After Qin Wanru stood still, she looked at Qi Rongji who followed behind and asked. Qin Wanru, what do you mean? What do you mean by, something happened to her, but nothing happened to me? Qi Rongji was annoyed when she heard this. She was blind and bumped into someone's ink bucket, and pushed their child down. You have to blame me for this. The child that big sister bumped into? Qin Wanru raised her eyebrows and asked with a look of disbelief, as if Qi Rongji was lying. Her look made Qi Rongji even angrier. Of course it was Qin Yuru who bumped into him. Could it be that I pushed her? She bumped into someone's child and pushed him angrily. It would be strange if the child didn't quarrel with her. Then, why didn't you say it just now? Qin Wanru said in surprise. Who knows? Maybe this child has been making trouble, and the adults don't believe what he said. So, they just don't ask anymore and apologize directly. Qi Rongji curled her lips and said. At this moment, she just wanted to clarify with Qin Wanru, but she didn't notice that the servant girl of Duke Xing's mansion standing beside her had coldly looked at her several times. Chapter 185. After talking for a while, the two of them walked over together. Second Miss Qin, our old madam is very sorry to hear that Master Hao bumped First Miss Qin. She wants to invite First Miss Qin to have a look and see if she is hurt. In fact, it's not only about Master Hao. Big sister is fine now. Qin Wanru said calmly. Old madam means that she is always worried and it's better to have a look in person. The old maid said with a smile. Qin Wanru frowned calmly. Was it also like this in the last life? Qin Yuru just came to old madam of Duke Xing's mansion and finally got the favor of old madam of Duke Xing's mansion. After that, she was raised in Duke Xing's mansion for a period of time. She even postponed her marriage for this favor. Inexplicably, she felt that it was more and more suspicious. Old madam of Duke Xing's mansion was so kind to an outsider that it was unbelievable. No one wants big sister and Master Hao to bump into each other. Moreover, Master Hao didn't mean it. In the end, he was as embarrassed as big sister. Old madam is concerned about this matter and asks big sister to have a look. Old madam is polite, but it will make people think that Master Hao deliberately bumped big sister. Qin Wanru said tactfully. She would meet old madam, but not now. Hearing her words, the old maid couldn't say anything even if she had more words. If she asked old madam to have a look, it would seem that Duke Xing's mansion was really in the wrong. Master Hao did deliberately make trouble. No family was willing to spread the rumor that their child had a bad character. Even a child wanted to have a reputation. Moreover, Master Hao was supported by Rui, and Great Elder Princess. Rui, and Great Elder Princess was originally dissatisfied with Duke Xing's mansion. If she had something on them, it would not be easy. Then I will go back to old madam. Thank you. Qin Wanru said lightly. The old maid had no choice but to turn and leave. The door of the room was pushed open. Qin Yuru appeared in front of everyone in a gorgeous dress. The dress was quite suitable for her, as if it was tailor-made for her. There was a hint of jealousy on Qi Rongji's face. When Qin Yuru wore this set of clothes, she immediately looked more outstanding than her. Since she had changed her clothes, she naturally had to leave here. After a few steps, Qin Wanru seemed to suddenly think of something. She stood still and said to the servant girl who led the way, "Where are the clothes that big sister changed?" Second Miss Qin, those clothes have been dirty. I don't know if they can still be worn. Second Miss, do you still want them? The servant girl asked in surprise. Second sister, it's so dirty that it can't be washed clean. Please throw the clothes away. We don't want them. Qin Yuru glared at Qin Wanru angrily. She secretly scolded Qin Wanru for being petty. She even wanted to take her dirty clothes back. How could Qin Wanru have the guts to ask? The clothes have just been splashed with ink, so they can still be worn. Qin Wanru smiled lightly, as if she didn't know that her words sounded extremely shameful. Fortunately, she looked the youngest, and her words were a little childish. The servant girl of Duke Xing's mansion only thought that she came from a small place and was reluctant to part with the clothes. She looked up at Qin Yuru and let Qin Yuru make a decision. I don't want the clothes. Qin Yuru waved her hand and said. Then don't we return big sister's clothes to Duke Xing's mansion? Qin Wanru hesitated for a moment and said again. Her words made Qin Yuru's face turn red. She stammered and said, Of course, we have to return the clothes. Although she really didn't want to return the clothes just now, she couldn't say it in front of everyone this time. Since we have to return the clothes, why don't we ask Duke Xing's mansion to wash the clothes and change them back? Moreover, is it really good to leave big sister's clothes in someone else's mansion? Qin Wanru said with a puzzled look. Qin Yuru was so angry that she wanted to vomit blood. A trace of malice flashed in her eyes, but she had to force a smile on her face. She said to the servant girl beside her, Then I have to trouble you to wash the clothes for me first. It's best if you can wash them, but it doesn't matter if they can't be washed. After I wash your Mrs. clothes and send them here, please ask the servants of our mansion to bring them back. Yes. The servant girl of Duke Xing's mansion answered. They went forward again. Unexpectedly, they saw Xiao Yuanhao at the corridor around the corner. As soon as he saw Qin Yuru, Xiao Yuanhao was furious. He rushed to Qin Yuru and shouted, Bad person, you are a bad person. You knocked over my ink on purpose. Master Hao, don't make trouble. Don't make trouble again. If you make trouble again, we will lose our lives. The two servants who followed him looked at each other and knew it was not good. They immediately rushed to hold him. Qin Yuru took 2 steps back and looked at him warily. The servant girl of Duke Xing's mansion and Mei Shui stood in front of her, as if they were facing a formidable enemy. Only Qi Rongji curled her lips and took 2 steps back. She decided to watch a good show. How, Qin Wanru said gently. Xiao Yuanhao, who was struggling, was stunned for a moment. He turned his big eyes and saw Qin Wanru standing aside. He was stunned at first and then became happy. Sister. Sister. If it weren't for the servant who was still holding him, he would have run to her. Qin Wanru walked slowly to him and glanced coldly at the 2 servants who were holding him. The 2 servants hurriedly let go of him. Xiao Yuanhao rushed to her. After struggling for a while, he was sweating profusely. Why are you here, Hao? Qin Wanru said with a smile, and there was a trace of deepness in her black eyes. That day, Rui and Great Elder Princess's intention should be to keep Xiao Yuanhao in Rui and Great Elder Princess's mansion. Why did she see Xiao Yuanhao again and again today and keep making trouble? Grandma asked me to come here. She said that many people would come to the banquet in the mansion today. Sister will also come. I miss you. Xiao Yuanhao, who stood in front of Qin Wanru, was as obedient as a rabbit. He didn't look like he was making threatening gestures just now. He pursed his lips and looked very aggrieved. He pulled Qin Wanru's sleeve and shook it. Sister lied. She said she came to see me, but she didn't. Looking at his aggrieved look, Qin Wanru couldn't help smiling. She reached out and touched his head. So, you came back to Duke Xing's mansion for sister? Of course, sister. Otherwise, I would be with Grandma now. But I couldn't find sister. Xiao Yuanhao became more and more aggrieved. Rui and Great Elder Princess let you go back to the mansion alone? Qin Wanru blinked her watery eyes and asked. Qin Yuru was stunned and her face was a little pale. Nanny Chu came with me. Xiao Yuanhao said. He reached out and pulled Qin Wanru. He got close to Qin Wanru and said mysteriously, Sister, you can write big characters over there. Sister, come with me. Let's play there. It's very fun. You can not only write but also draw. Where is Nanny Chu? Qin Wanru moved her feet slightly and asked softly. I don't know where she is. It seems that Grandma has something to tell Grandma, so she asked Nanny Chu to go there. She hasn't come back until now. Maybe it's something very important. Grandma is afraid that Nanny Chu can't remember it, so she said more. How, now it's just the two of them. They used to serve me. Xiao Yuanhao looked like a little adult. He reached out and pulled Qin Wanru with a smile. Qin Wanru bit her lips gently. Her long eyelashes fluttered a few times to hide all the questions at the bottom of her eyes. Duke Xing's mansion was too suspicious, and Xiao Yuanhao was too good at making trouble. Because the thing between him and Qin Yuru in front of everyone was not made clear in the end. But everyone must think that it was Xiao Yuanhao's fault. Why did you bump into this sister? Qin Wanru thought of something and pointed at Qin Yuru, who looked a little pale. She is a bad person. She bumped into me on purpose. I was carrying the ink to write. She saw it and bumped into me on purpose. Seeing that Qin Wanru was pointing at Qin Yuru, Xiao Yuanhao immediately became angry. He stared at Qin Yuru and complained. Why did she do it on purpose? Didn't they bump into each other accidentally? Qin Wanru said with a sweet and harmless smile. She did it on purpose. She didn't walk such a big road. Why did she bump into me? She is a bad person and I hate her the most. Xiao Yuanhao seemed to dislike Qin Yuru very much. As long as Qin Yuru was mentioned, he would get angry. His round face puffed up, looking both cute and ridiculous. Second sister, let's go. It's hard to explain to this child. This is Duke Xing's mansion. Don't be a busybody. Qin Yuru coughed in a low voice and said. Bad person, go away. Don't stay in my house. Hearing that Qin Yuru wanted Qin Wanru to leave, Xiao Yuanhao reached out to hold Qin Wanru and angrily drove her away. Big sister, you and Miss Qi can go for a walk. I will play with him for a while. Qin Wanru's eyes flickered and said. Second Miss Qin, let me do it. You are a guest. How can we trouble you to accompany our master Hao? You and two misses can go outside. I will play with Master Hao here. The servant girl of Duke Xing's mansion answered with a smile. I don't want you. I want my sister. Xiao Yuanhao twisted his little body and did not let go of her. Master Hao, let go of this Mississippi. She is a guest today. Let me take you to see the cricket you liked last time, okay? A servant hurried over and reached out to hold Xiao Yuanhao's hand. But under Qin Wanru's cold gaze, his hand fell down and did not fall on Xiao Yuanhao. Yes, Master Hao. Last time when you were in the mansion, didn't you say you would go to the place where crickets were sold outside? Let me take you there in a while, okay? Another servant also hurried over and squatted beside Xiao Yuanhao to persuade him. Xiao Yuanhao hesitated. He looked at Qin Wanru with a pair of big clear eyes and then looked at the two servants. He felt it difficult to give them up. What should he do if he liked them all? Sister, can you take me to see crickets? After a long while, Xiao Yuanhao asked hesitantly with a face full of desire. Qin Wanru glanced at the servants of Duke Xing's mansion. The strange feeling in her heart became more and more obvious. These servants obviously did not want her to accompany Xiao Yuanhao. Chapter 186. I'll play with Hao. Qin Wanru glanced at the crowd with her clear eyes and made up her mind. She smiled and said, since Hao specially came to find me, I'll naturally play with him. Second sister, this is Duke Xing's mansion. Qin Yuru's face darkened and she said harshly. I can play with him in Rui and Great Elder Princess's mansion. Why can't I play with him now? Is it because we are in Duke Xing's mansion? Qin Wanru raised her head and looked at Qin Yuru with a faint smile, asking directly. The servant girl of Duke Xing's mansion originally wanted to persuade her, but when she heard Qin Wanru's words, she didn't know what to say. Duke Xing's mansion was prosperous, but Rui and Great Elder Princess's mansion was noble. Qin Wanru, what do you want to do now? This is Duke Xing's mansion. Qin Yuru approached Qin Wanru in a few steps. Regardless of the servants of Duke Xing's mansion beside her, she lowered her voice and said angrily to Qin Wanru, if you really make trouble, no one can protect you. What can happen to me? Collide with him again. Big sister is an adult, but you don't even know how to walk. Are you also worried that I don't know how to walk? The smile on Qin Wanru's face became brighter, but her eyes were cold. Qin Yuru's face changed dramatically, and her hand, which was about to hold Qin Wanru's hand, trembled slightly. Although it was only for a moment, it still fell into Qin Wanru's eyes. As expected, there was something fishy about the collision between Qin Yuru and Xiao Yuanhao. Qin Wanru narrowed her eyes tightly. What nonsense are you talking about? I don't understand what you are saying. Well, since you must accompany this little bully, I won't care about you. Qin Yuru took a step back and said angrily. She turned around and said to Qi Rongji, Sister Rongji, since second sister doesn't want to walk with us, let's go. After saying that, she turned around and left angrily. Qi Rongji looked at Qin Wanru with a smile, and then looked at Qin Yuru. She slightly raised the corner of her eyes and followed Qin Yuru. The servant girl who led the way didn't know who to follow for the moment. She looked at Qin Wanru and said awkwardly, Second Miss Qin, I am alone and can't lead the way in two directions. I don't need it. You can lead the way for big sister. Qin Wanru smiled and looked at Xiao Yuanhao, do you know the way in the mansion? Hearing Qin Wanru's question, Xiao Yuanhao straightened his chest and said like an adult, Don't worry, sister. I know the way. I will take you out. Seeing Qin Wanru and Xiao Wanru and Yuanhao, Xiao, the servant girl left. Where is the place where you said you were going to take me to write? Qin Wanru asked with a smile. She changed the topic about crickets with one sentence. Sister, come with me. I'll show you. Xiao Yuanhao said proudly. Young Master Hao, I'd better take you to see the crickets. That cricket is so big and powerful. It beat all the crickets from before. A manservant came up to stop him. Yes. Master Hao, don't you like them the most? Another servant immediately said. Xiao Yuanhao was a child after all. Hearing what they said, he hesitated again. He raised his delicate and beautiful little face and looked at Qin Wanru hesitantly. Sister, do you like crickets? I don't like crickets. I just want to see the place to write big characters. I haven't seen a place to write big characters. Qin Wanru glanced coldly at the two servants who were trying hard to encourage Xiao Yuanhao to play crickets. She smiled slightly. She didn't know who assigned these two servants to Xiao Yuanhao. Obviously, they didn't want Xiao Yuanhao to learn good things. Raising the disabled. Was that what they meant? It was said that Madame of Duke Xing was in charge of the whole Duke Xing's mansion. Everyone praised Madame of Duke Xing when they mentioned her. Did she really know nothing about the two servants of Xiao Yuanhao? Just now in front of everyone, Madame of Duke Xing treated Xiao Yuanhao better than her own son. Because of Xiao Yuanhao, Madame of Duke Xing apologized to Qin Yuru and even said that she would go to Xiao Yuanhao's mansion to apologize. However, she didn't ask about the details of the matter at that time and whether Xiao Yuanhao was right or not. Madame of Duke Xing put all the blame on Xiao Yuanhao without asking anything. She was so scheming. Master Hao, A servant looked at Qin Wanru and wanted to say something, but was pushed away by Yujie. What are you talking about? Our miss wants to play with Master Hao. Can't you let her? Yujie said. I dare not, but... Seeing that the situation was not good, the other servant hurriedly explained. What's the but? When I was in Rui and Great Elder Princess's mansion, Rui and Great Elder Princess asked me to play with Master Hao more. Why can't I play with Master Hao here? Is there a big rule in Duke Xing's mansion, or are you two servants deliberately stirring up these things? Qin Wanru's eyes fell on the two servants coldly. She slightly raised the corner of her eyes and asked sharply. The two servants were dumbfounded. Although they had received the order not to let the second Miss Qin get in touch with their young master, the current situation was not something they could handle. For a moment, they looked at each other and panicked. Qin Wanru ignored them and said to Xiao Yuanhao, "Let's go." "How, go to write calligraphy for my sister." Okay, I'll go right now." Although Xiao Yuanhao didn't understand what Qin Wanru said to the servants, he was happy that Qin Wanru was willing to accompany him. He immediately ran to lead the way. Qin Wanru and Yujie followed him. When the two servants saw that Master Hao had left, one of them gave the other a look. The other immediately understood and ran inside to report the news. The other chased after Master Hao and said, "Master Hao, wait a moment. This servant can't catch up with you." Seeing that someone chased after him, Xiao Yuanhao became excited. He kicked the ground with his legs and ran faster. As he ran, he hid behind the rockery and rocks. After hiding, he peeped outside. When Qin Wanru and others approached him, he suddenly jumped out to scare them. The rocks and rockery were uneven. Seeing that Xiao Yuanhao almost fell down again, Qin Wanru's face changed. She stood still and waved to Xiao Yuanhao. "Hao, come here. I have something important to tell you." Xiao Yuanhao was playing happily. He blinked his big eyes and ran to her, panting. Sister, what's the matter?" "How, have you always played like this with them?" Qin Wanru pointed at the servant beside her and asked. Although the servant was young, he was at least 10 years old. Compared with him, Xiao Yuanhao couldn't run steadily. "Yes, it's fun." Xiao Yuanhao raised his innocent eyes and looked at Qin Wanru blankly. His clear eyes softened Qin Wanru's heart. "So you purposely hit people and hurt yourself?" Qin Wanru asked softly. "Yes, Hao purposely didn't pay attention." "Sister, look." Xiao Yuanhao stretched out his right hand and rolled up his cuff. There was a big scar on his chubby little arm, which almost made his little arm look ferocious. Qin Wanru couldn't help but gasp. "What a big wound. Did you fall?" Qin Wanru reached out and touched his little fat arm gently. She frowned slightly. "When I was running, I accidentally fell down. The ground was full of broken stones. It was very painful. Sister, breathe on it. Then it won't hurt anymore." Xiao Yuanhao raised his little fat arm higher and looked like he was asking for comfort. Qin Wanru blew on his arm gently. The child immediately showed a big smile. He was so cute that only his teeth could be seen. "Sister, it doesn't hurt now. Hao has grown up and falls less often." So this child had fallen many times since he was a child. Sure enough, no one loved a child who had lost his parents. Although Duke Xing's mansion was a big family and had a lot of assets, no one really treated this little boy well. However, he was just a child. It was so easy for a few adults to deceive a child and lead him astray. He was the only legitimate son of the late heir of Duke Xing and the only grandson of Rui, and great elder princess. With these 2 points, Madam of Duke Xing must be a taboo. He pursed his thin lips silently, reached out and carefully helped him roll down his sleeves. "How, you can't run anymore in the future. It's not good to bump into others and it's not good to fall. If Hao were to be knocked down by someone while walking, would Hao be unhappy?" Xiao Yuanhao's long eyelashes fluttered and he suddenly said obediently, "Sister, you are talking about the bad guys who hit me before, right? The bad guys hit me and I will be unhappy. So if I hit others, I will also be a bad guy, right?" "Yes, Hao is a good boy. So you should walk properly in the future. Don't run anymore." Qin Wanru reached out and gently pinched his pink little face and said with a smile. Then you should walk properly in the future. I won't run anymore. Xiao Yuanhao liked Qin Wanru very much. He didn't get angry when she pinched his little face gently. Instead, he said with a smile. The servant looked at Qin Wanru with fear and lowered his head, not daring to answer. In the past, if someone reached out to pinch Master Hao's face, he would be very lucky not to get angry. Even if old madam of the mansion wanted to pinch Master Hao's face, she had to discuss with him first. How could he pinch Master Hao's face with a smile? How, you are an adult. You are so sensible. Qin Wanru praised him again. Her words made Xiao Yuanhao even prouder. He stuck out his chest and acted like an adult. He even shook his sleeves, looking calm and steady. Yu Jia couldn't help but laugh out loud. What's wrong with you? Xiao Yuanhao said. What's wrong with you? Chapter 187. The tall screen wall was right in the middle of the courtyard, blocking the buildings behind the courtyard tightly. On this screen wall, there were many characters, big and small, written in different fonts. Qin Wanru involuntarily approached it, and her eyes fell on the characters on it. The strokes were very strong, and it could be seen that the writer had amazing wrist strength. However, the characters were slightly different. It seemed that the writer started from the right side, and then wrote to the left side. The characters were getting more and more mature and better, and the strokes were vigorous and well controlled. This was a screen wall for practicing calligraphy. Qin Wanru had heard that some children of aristocratic families would leave a screen wall in the corner of their courtyard to practice calligraphy. However, she had never heard of such a big screen wall, and it directly blocked the door. This momentum was not known by ordinary people. His gaze shifted from the shadow wall to the words on it. From the words on it, he could tell that the person who wrote it was definitely not an ordinary person. As his gaze landed on it, it was as if he could see a figure flashing across his mind. He seemed to be writing something at great speed. His back was tall and proud, and there was another slender figure walking over. Qin Wanru felt a headache as if it was about to split. She took 2 steps back, closed her eyes, and was about to fall. Seeing her fall, Yu Jia immediately held her and hurriedly called, Miss. Sister, what's wrong with you? Qin Wanru reached out to touch her head, and slowly opened her eyes. The sky above her head was blue, and the scene she saw just now was just an illusion. She calmed down, stood still with Yu Jia's hand, and looked at the screen wall again. There were just some excellent characters, and there was no man's proud figure or slim figure. Miss, are you okay? Yu Jia looked at Qin Wanru's pale face and asked. In just a moment, her delicate face immediately turned from pink to white as snow. How could she not panic? I'm fine. Qin Wanru forced a smile, took a deep breath, and suppressed the inexplicable sadness in her heart. Sister, are you really okay? Do you want to go in and have a rest? Except for the room in the middle, you can rest in other rooms. Xiao Yunhao pulled the corner of her clothes and said timidly. Qin Wanru suddenly fainted, which scared him. How? Don't worry. I'm fine. Who wrote this? Qin Wanru asked. These are my father's words. They were all written by my father. I heard that my father had been practicing calligraphy since he was young. Sometimes, he would practice here. These are all written by my father. Sister, take a look. Xiao Yuanhao took Qin Wanru's hand and led her to the back. The back was also full of words, but there was a very clean space in the corner. Sister, look, they said this is the place my father left for me to write. Xiao Yuanhao said proudly. Therefore, this was the place where the former heir of Xing State, who had died, lived. Hao's father is really amazing. Looking at the little child trying to straighten his body in front of the words written by his father, Qin Wanru's nose was inexplicably sour, and there was an unspeakable sadness rushing out. Biting her lips to suppress the palpitation in her heart, Qin Wanru's voice became softer. Did Hao come here with ink just now to write? Yes. Xiao Yunhao said and looked around deliberately. Finding no one else came, he got close to Qin Wanru and whispered, Grandma didn't allow Hao to come here, but Hao still wanted to come here. Grandma had no choice but to let Hao come here every few days, and he was not allowed to touch the things here. She said my father would be angry if he damaged them. Then why did you let Hao come here to write this time? Qin Wanru asked calmly. She didn't allow him to come here in the past, so she naturally wouldn't allow him to come here to write. However, he came here with a bucket of ink just now. It was obvious that he wanted to come here to write. They said I could come here secretly to write a few words. This was originally left by my father. He said that I would live in Grandma's place recently. If I didn't write a few words here, what if someone robbed this place in the future? This place is Hao-er's. My father left it to me, and I won't lose it. Xiao Yuanhao's little face tightened, and his little fists were clenched. It seemed that this place was all his, and no one was allowed to rob it. So, it was the two servants who deceived him, and then they met Qin Yuru. Then they bumped into Qin Yuru and made such a farce. Qin Wanru had sorted out the whole thing in her mind, but she still had a question. Why did Qin Yuru make life difficult for a child? Moreover, this child's identity was not someone she could afford to offend. She looked at Xiao Yuanhao with pity, patted his head gently, and squatted down. Hao should eat well, study well, and write well. In the future, you will be able to write as many words as your father. Before he had the ability to get what he deserved, saying such words was actually the source of his sin. Xiao Yuanhao's eyes lit up. When he was about to say something, he seemed to think of something. He lowered his head, twisted his body, and said, but Hao can't write well now. Why can't Hao write? Qin Wanru asked in surprise. Even if he didn't go to school, a child of his age should have learned early. Hao hasn't learned to write, so he writes casually. Xiao Yuanhao seemed to feel embarrassed, and his little face blushed. He became more bashful, and said softly. So there was no one to teach him at all. His so-called writing was probably just a few scribbles, right? Now she could basically be sure that Duke Xing's mansion seemed to treat this child well on the surface, and everyone seemed to love him very much. But in fact, they wanted to raise this child to be disabled. Outsiders only thought that Duke Xing's mansion raised a bully who couldn't be educated, but they didn't think that there was no one to educate him at all. How could he be educated? She pursed her lips. She couldn't remember whether she had seen Xiao Yuanhao in her last life, and didn't know what happened to him later. But looking at his current situation, if he went on like this, he could only be raised to be disabled. Hao, when you go back, tell Grandma that you can learn to write. If you write well, I will come here with you to write together with your fathers, and make him happy, okay? Qin Wanru asked softly. Xiao Yuanhao's gloomy eyes lit up immediately, and he laughed loudly. Okay, sister, you can come here to write with me in the future. Don't see that bad person, and don't let her write. At this moment, he remembered Qin Yuru again. Okay, as long as you write well, I will accompany you to write, and let you compare with father. Maybe you can write better. Qin Wanru said with a smile. Sister, I will take you in to have a look. Father's things are there. Xiao Yuanhao pointed to the back and said. At this time, they had entered the yard. How do you know? Qin Wanru asked curiously. Hao sneaked in. There is a window there, and Hao secretly loosened it, so you can go in. Xiao Yuanhao's voice became more and more light, and he looked at his servant. His voice was so low that only Qin Wanru could hear it, which meant that only he knew. He will find it. Qin Wanru touched the child's head and said. Drive him away, and then let's go in. Xiao Yuanhao was eager to take Qin Wanru to see the good things he found, so he pulled the corner of Qin Wanru's clothes and said. Second Miss Qin. Before Qin Wanru answered, Madame of Duke Xing came out from behind the screen wall. She looked at Qin Wanru coldly, and the gentle smile in front of others disappeared. Surrounded by a large group of people, she looked amazing. Madame of Duke Xing. Qin Wanru went forward calmly, bowed to Madame of Duke Xing, and then stood aside. Xiao Yuanhao also ran over and called her second aunt intimately. How, I told you not to go out, but why are you so disobedient? You even brought a guest here. If your grandmother knows it, she will be angry again. Madame of Duke Xing glanced at the tightly locked door, and her face became a little calmer, and she said softly to Xiao Yuanhao. Her words seemed to remind Xiao Yuanhao of something bad, and his face turned a little pale, but he still pouted slightly and said, "But I want to see it with my sister." "You have seen it, and there is nothing to see. Go back." Madame of Duke Xing's voice became more and more gentle, with a smile in her eyes. "But I still want to take my sister in to have a look." Xiao Yuanhao twisted his body uneasily and said. "Just now Nanny Chu and Rui and Great Elder Princess's mansion was looking for you. If you go out again, Nanny Chu will be worried to death." Before returning to the mansion, didn't Rui and Great Elder Princess tell you not to go out and to listen to Nanny Chu? Madame of Duke Xing coaxed him. "Yes, she did." Xiao Yuanhao lowered his head shyly. He did not listen to his grandmother's words, and his grandmother would be sad if she said it. "Then go to find Nanny Chu first, okay?" Madame of Duke Xing said. Xiao Yuanhao wanted to go, but he was worried about Qin Wanru. He looked up at Qin Wanru and wanted to shake his head again. "How, go to find Nanny Chu? I have something to do, and I will come to see you in Great Elder Princess's mansion next time." Qin Wanru comforted him. "Is it true? You said it last time, but you didn't come for so long." Xiao Yuanhao pouted his pink lips and muttered. "It must be true this time, so I came to see how, Qin Wanru smiled. "Then Pinky swear with how, Xiao Yuanhao reached out his little fat hand and gestured to Qin Wanru. Qin Wanru helplessly reached out her thin little finger and gently hooked his little fat finger. "How, can you go back now? Sister, remember to find how, Xiao Yuanhao was taken away reluctantly and looked back 3 times at every step. "Second Miss Qin, the banquet is about to start. Let's talk on the way." Madame of Duke Xing looked at Qin Wanru's smiling face and said very politely with a smile. "Madame of Duke Xing, please." Qin Wanru's eyes remained unchanged and she said naturally and gracefully, with a faint ripple in her eyes. Chapter 188. Second Miss Qin, how, is still young. If he has offended you, please forgive him. But it is very inappropriate for him to bring second Miss Qin here because he is not sensible. Madame of Duke Xing said lightly as she walked out. She meant that Xiao Yuanhao was still young and Qin Wanru was older than him. It was very impolite for her to follow him in. Was this the reason why Madame of Duke Xing came here in a hurry? He turned his body slightly and looked at the courtyard behind him without batting an eyelid. This was a grand courtyard, but the owner of the courtyard was no longer here. Even so, the courtyard still retained its old appearance. It could be seen how much the manor valued the original owner of the courtyard. "Madam, you are right. I don't know that people can't come in here," Qin Wanru said softly with a strange look flashing in her eyes. "This is a forbidden area in the mansion. Even the people in the mansion can't come in casually. How, is not sensible, so he comes in from time to time." Madame of Duke Xing's face became more and more gentle. She looked at Qin Wanru and said, "This child is congenial to you. I guess you saved him that day." "Madam, you are exaggerating," Qin Wanru said calmly. "How, grew up in the mansion since he was a child. He is the only child left. How can she not care about him?" Old Madam kept him in her mouth and was afraid that he would melt. She held him in her palm and was afraid that he would fall off. She did everything for him in the mansion. Unexpectedly, he almost had an accident when he went out to attend a banquet. Madame of Duke Xing said sincerely. Qin Wanru didn't answer this time. What Madame of Duke Xing needed was a listener at this time. Rui, and great elder princess wants to take Hao away now. I am afraid that Hao can't get used to living here. Madame of Duke Xing said with a sigh. She slightly tilted her head and looked at Qin Wanru, who was a step behind her. She said, I heard that second Miss Qin's biological mother is not Madame Shui. I wonder who her biological mother is. Her words changed a little fast. Fortunately, Qin Wanru had prepared for it. She slightly lowered her head to hide the cold look in her eyes. I don't know about my biological mother. My father doesn't allow me to ask more. Is your biological mother dead? Madame of Duke Xing said with pity in her eyes. What a poor child. Although her previous words were abrupt, the latter sentence was enough to make people feel that she was compassionate and kind. Wanru doesn't know. Qin Wanru frowned. Have you never seen your biological mother? Madame of Duke Xing asked with concern and a soft look. Qin Wanru shook her head gently and whispered, Father, Mother and grandmother love me very much. What a pitiful and sensible child. Madame of Duke Xing sighed and said with her eyes falling on the embroidery pattern on her clothes, the embroidery pattern is really beautiful. I saw that the three misses from your Qin's mansion all have such embroidery pattern. Who came up with this kind of embroidery pattern? Wanru doesn't know. It was made in the sewing room. Qin Wanru shook her head again. The 3 sets of clothes were all made by the sewing room? Madame of Duke Xing frowned and asked seemingly casually, as if she was really a little curious about this matter. All of them. When we just arrived in the capital city, grandmother asked someone to make clothes for us. Miss Qi happened to live in our mansion, so they made clothes together. But the orchid pattern. Qin Wanru hesitated when she said this. It seemed that she thought of something, but she stopped talking on second thought. How about the orchid pattern? Wanru seems to have seen this orchid pattern somewhere. Qin Wanru gently rubbed her forehead, but she couldn't remember at the moment. Where did you see it? Although Madame of Duke Xing looked calm, her voice was unconsciously a little heavier. Qin Wanru raised her eyes and looked at her tightly closed lips. Her eyes became more and more deep. Wanru can't remember, but I should have seen it before. Maybe in Magistrate Qi's mansion, or in our mansion, or in a family in Jiangzhou. Qin Wanru said. Jiangzhou, that was to say, in Jiangzhou. Second Miss Qin, do you have a glazed lamp in your mansion? Taking a deep breath, Madame of Duke Xing suppressed the palpitation in her heart and asked. This. Wanru is not sure. Qin Wanru's clear eyes showed doubt and she opened her mouth slightly. While they were talking, several madams turned out in front of them. Seeing Madame of Duke Xing and Qin Wanru walk over, they stood on the roadside and waited for them to pass. Then they walked forward together, talking and laughing. Qin Wanru was originally walking beside Madame of Duke Xing, but she gradually fell behind the crowd. Looking at Madame of Duke Xing, who was smiling gently in front of her, a trace of malice flashed in her eyes. She was now sure that Madame of Duke Xing knew the orchid seal, and this orchid seal was hers. Could it be assumed that in the last life, Qin Yuru used this orchid seal to climb up to Duke Xing's mansion, but she didn't know what this orchid seal represented? Why did Duke Xing's mansion think highly of this seal? And the degree to which they thought highly of it was a taboo for Madame of Duke Xing. She couldn't say that the seal was hers yet. Before she figured out the truth of the matter, she had to move forward slowly, step by step. Any carelessness could cause her to fall into a state of eternal damnation. Madame of Duke Xing led the crowd directly to the banquet place. The banquet was held in the garden of Duke Xing's mansion, surrounded by long curtains that were lifted high to block the wind. A large chrysanthemum garden was in the banquet place. It was the time when chrysanthemums were in full bloom, so this place was almost a sea of chrysanthemums. Many people came to this sea of flowers and praised the chrysanthemum appreciation party held by Duke Xing's mansion. The whole capital city knew that Duke Xing's mansion had a chrysanthemum garden that other mansions didn't have. Such a large area of chrysanthemums was not only beautiful, but also had a variety of chrysanthemums, many of which couldn't be found outside. Qin Wanru stood in front of a cluster of flowers and stopped. Her eyes fell on a few small flowers on the edge of the cluster of flowers. Those flowers didn't look like chrysanthemums, and they were small. They seemed to be random and sporadic wildflowers. But in this place, the possibility of this kind of wildflower was really small. She gently picked up the corner of her skirt, squatted down, and carefully looked at those small, almost inconspicuous flowers. She always felt that she had forgotten something in her mind. "Miss, these flowers can be used as medicine." Seeing Qin Wanru squatting down, Yujie also squatted down. After looking at those small flowers curiously, she said in surprise. Hearing what she said, Qin Wanru suddenly remembered that these plants with small flowers were indeed a kind of medicine. She had been thinking about flowers just now, but she thought in the wrong direction. It can clear the heart and clear the eyes, and it's also good for health. Qin Wanru reached out to touch these small flowers and looked around. It was almost a sea of flowers around. It was really not something that ordinary people could do to raise these chrysanthemums so well and keep these plants with medicinal properties. Duke Xing's mansion really took a lot of pains to raise these chrysanthemums. "Second sister, did you have a good time?" Qin Yuru's voice sounded in Qin Wanru's ears. Qin Wanru raised her head and clapped her hands. Then she stood up and looked behind her. Not only Qin Yuru, but also Countess Yong and several other madams and misses. Qi Rongji was the last one. She looked very pitiful and seemed to be excluded. "Not bad," Qin Wanru said with indifferent eyes. "Where is Master Hao? Why doesn't he play with you?" Qin Yuru said with a faint smile. She just didn't like Qin Wanru. Even if she repeatedly warned herself not to make trouble, she couldn't suppress the anger she had suffered before. She didn't believe that Qin Wanru could know that she deliberately hit that child. "How, went back first." "Big sister, have you seen my mother?" Qin Wanru said lightly. "How do I know where Madame Shui is?" Qin Yuru said unhappily. She didn't want to be with Shui Rulan. Who cared where Shui Rulan was now? "Mother hasn't come yet. I'll go to find her." Qin Wanru looked around and didn't find Shui Rulan coming. She said, "Mother has been in poor health. If it weren't for us today, she wouldn't have come." After saying that, she raised her eyebrows and looked at Qi Rongji who came over. "Sister Wanru, I'll go with you to find her." Qi Rongji finally got a chance to speak and said hurriedly. Just now, she and Qin Yuru didn't go far before they met people from Duke Yong's mansion. After that, people from Duke Yong's mansion only talked to Qin Yuru and didn't even give her a chance to speak. How could she not be depressed? Qin Yuru was originally unwilling to go with them. But seeing that both of them went to find her, it would be too much if she didn't go with them. She could only secretly bite her teeth and force a smile on her face. "Then let's go together." So the three of them asked for the direction of the flower hall and went to it. On the way, they met Shui Rulan, so they turned back together. The seats had been arranged in advance. The seats of Qin's mansion were neither too close to the front nor too close to the back. This arrangement was very appropriate. What was inappropriate was that Countess Yong was looking at her coldly across the table. Coincidentally, Countess Yong was face to face with her. Seeing Qin Wanru turn to look at her, Countess Yong snorted coldly and looked annoyed. Qin Wanru rolled her eyes and didn't seem to mind at all. She even smiled at Countess Yong, which made Countess Yong's face darker. What happened in Rui and Great Elder Princess's mansion made her feel ashamed to see others, and all of this was caused by Qin Wanru. A servant girl came to her ear and whispered a few words. She looked at Qin Wanru calmly, nodded, and gave a few orders in a low voice. The servant girl retreated respectfully and then stood outside the hall. She said something to an old maid who was guarding there. The old maid also looked at Qin Wanru and then retreated silently. People came and went at the banquet. No one would pay attention to the things between a servant girl and an old maid, but Qin Wanru saw it and couldn't help but be vigilant. The last old maid glanced at her. She saw it clearly, and her eyes became colder. Chapter 189. At their table, Qin Wanru sat close to Shui Rulan, Qin Yuru was next to Qin Wanru, and then Qi Rongji. Since they came from the same mansion, they naturally sat together. Qin Yuru didn't want to talk to Qin Wanru, so she turned to Qi Rongji. Although she also hated Qi Rongji now, at least she was much better than Qin Wanru. Qin Yuru didn't talk to her, and Qin Wanru certainly wouldn't ask for a snub, so she simply ignored her and talked to Shui Rulan from time to time. The dishes were prepared early, and the speed of serving was very fast. After serving the dishes, the servant girls retreated in an orderly manner. The direction of serving the dishes was behind Qin Wanru, and then went around to a madam in front of Shui Rulan to serve the dishes. Finally, a fruit plate was served. At this time, it was the harvest time. There were a lot of fruits on the plate, including a few round fruits. Maybe it was because the fruit plate was too heavy or the servant girl was too thin. When she passed by Qin Wanru, her hand was crooked, and a fruit hit Qin Wanru's head before it was put on the table. Qin Wanru was talking to Shui Rulan when her head was hit. She immediately uttered "ouch" and touched her head. "Miss, I'm sorry." Seeing that the fruit fell on Qin Wanru, the servant girl hurriedly stretched out a hand and seemed to want to rub Qin Wanru's head. She held the fruit plate with two hands, and when she loosened one hand, the fruit plate was immediately unstable and fell down in the direction of Qin Wanru. However, Yujia on the side was faster and pushed her hard. So this time the fruit fell on Qin Yuru, and Qin Wanru and Qi Rongji also slightly missed it. Qi Rongji reacted quickly and hurriedly jumped away. Only the corner of her skirt was slightly stained with water, and most of the fruit fell on Qin Yuru. Shui Rulan was shocked and was about to get up. Qin Wanru didn't care about the embarrassment on her head, and immediately took her hand and comforted her. "Mother, don't move." She glanced at a few small round fruits on the ground. The small fruits were about the same size, but if stepped on, it was easy to fall. "How dare you!" Qin Yuru was stunned to see the water stains on her new clothes. She was furious. She had just put on this set of clothes not long ago. Plop! The servant girl who delivered the fruit plate immediately knew that it was not good. She hurriedly knelt down and loudly begged for mercy. "Please forgive me, Mrs. Please forgive me." Qin Yuru's face was livid with anger. She suddenly stood up and seemed to want to scold the servant girl. Unexpectedly, she stepped on something round and slippery. She lost her balance and fell towards Qin Wanru. Qin Wanru was prepared for this. She reached out to help her and said in a low voice, "Big sister, be careful. Mother's body can't bear being hit." Qin Yuru held Qin Wanru's hand to steady herself. She opened her mouth to scold Qin Wanru, but when she saw the courtyard full of guests, she knew it was not the right time. He turned his head to look at the trembling servant girl who was still kneeling on the ground and begging for mercy. His voice was almost squeezed out from between his teeth. "Do you know how to serve the fruit platter? If you don't know, get someone else to do it. Young miss, please spare this servant, please spare this servant." The servant girl kowtowed heavily to Qin Yuru with a look of panic and uneasiness. After a few kowtows, a bruise immediately appeared on her forehead. It was obvious that she really used her strength to kowtow. "Yuru, forget it," Shui Rulan said softly. As a guest, no matter what, they could not directly punish the servants of others' mansion. Moreover, they were from Duke Xing's mansion. They could not punish them at will. How can I forget it? I can't wear these clothes." Chin Yuru reached out to point at her clothes and said sullenly. The water stains on the clothes were very obvious. Several pieces were connected together, which was really not decent. In fact, not only Chin Yuru, but also Chin Wanru. She had to stand in front of Shui Rulan, so she could not avoid it. I'll ask someone to get clothes for you later. Just change. Shui Rulan said in a low voice and looked around. Although the noise here was loud, because there were many tables in the banquet, no one found the table in the middle. Now it seemed that they could only do this. Chin Yuru clenched her teeth with hatred, afraid that she could not control herself and wanted to slap the servant girl several times. Find a supervisor here and take them to change clothes. Shui Rulan told the servant girl. Hearing Shui Rulan's words, the servant girl felt as if she had been pardoned. She hurriedly kowtowed to them 3 times, stood up, and ran out in a hurry without even picking up the fruit plate. After a while, she came back with an old maid of Duke Xing's mansion. Chin Wanru glanced at the old maid calmly. It was the old maid who had secretly glanced at her several times when Countess Yong asked the servant girl to pass the message. If it was just an accident, then she really lived 2 lives in vain. Mrs., please come with me. There is a special courtyard for guests to rest over there. You can change clothes there. The old maid came up and apologized first. Then she reached out and pointed to the right rear. There was indeed a row of houses on the edge of the sea of flowers. It was a little far away and could not be seen clearly. The 2 servant girls went to get clothes. Chin Yuru and Chin Wanru followed the old maid to rest there. Shui Rulan was worried and wanted to go with them, but was refused by Chin Wanru. She gently pinched Shui Rulan's hand to reassure her. The 2 followed the old maid to the right rear. There were so many people coming and going, so no one noticed this episode. Of course, some people who should pay attention to it still noticed it. Madame of Duke Xing calmly bent her lips, restrained her eyes, and still talked and laughed with a madam beside her. No one noticed that she had actually paid attention to the movement over there. Countess Yong's eyes were cold, and her eyes followed their figures. After a while, she snorted softly and then turned her eyes away. What would happen next was out of her control. Anyway, it had nothing to do with her. This was a relatively large guest courtyard with a good scenery. Standing at the gate of the courtyard, they could see that there were 5 or 6 wing rooms on the left and right. Together with several rooms in the main room, there were indeed a lot of rooms. Mrs., please go inside and have a rest. When the 2 servant girls come over, you can change clothes. After the banquet is over, I will report this matter to our madam, and she will punish the servant girl severely. The old maid pointed at the empty courtyard with a smile and said. Chin Wanru looked at the yard calmly and found that there were also chrysanthemums in the yard. Although the number of chrysanthemums was much less than that outside, there were many varieties. The small flower bed in the middle of the yard formed a beautiful scenery. In addition, it was quiet, very quiet. Compared with the banquet outside, this was really a quiet and leisurely place. Today's banquet was held in the chrysanthemum garden, but the real place was far away from here. Basically, no one would come here. The so-called resting place for the guests was actually just a saying. After the banquet, all the guests would basically leave. If they were really close friends, they would not rest in this deserted corner. Looking outside, this courtyard should be close to the wall of Duke Xing's mansion, and the high wall was behind the courtyard wall. Looking inside, there was a big tree on the right side of the flower bed. Under the tree, there was a stone table and 4 stone stools. There was also a plate of fruit, a teapot and 2 teacups on the table. It looked very quiet and peaceful. Let's go over there and sit and wait for a while. Chin Yuru pointed and said. Chin Wanru stopped and said, I'll take a look here and then go over. Oh, whatever. There was no one else here, so Chin Yuru did not suppress her temper. She turned and entered the courtyard alone, and went to the stone table. She walked to the table and sat down. Reaching out to touch the teapot, she found it was still hot, so she poured a cup for herself. The color of the tea was light green, and at first glance, she knew it was good tea. She immediately took a sip and felt that the aftertaste was endless. She squinted at Qin Wanru, sneered, turned away, and continued to drink the tea. It had nothing to do with her whether Qin Wanru was willing to come in or not. Then I'll go back first. Mrs., come back after changing your clothes. The old maid said with a smile. Wait a minute. Qin Wanru frowned, reached out to pinch her earlobe, and said, Did you see my earring? I didn't see it. When the old maid saw the ruby earring hanging on one of Qin Wanru's ears, and the other ear was empty, she panicked for a moment. What should I do? This is the new earring that Grandma just bought for me. Did the servant girl take it just now? When she threw the fruit on my head, I felt that she touched me. Qin Wanru frowned tightly, and her face was not very good. Of course, no one would look good in this situation. It can't be. The old maid hurriedly shook her head and said. Then where is my earring? I don't know. The old maid panicked and rolled her eyes. She originally wanted to leave according to the plan, but she did not expect such a thing to happen in this bone formation eye. Will you accompany me to look for it? If you can't find it, report it to your madam and explain it. Qin Wanru narrowed her eyes and said. But there are still water stains on your clothes. Do you want to change first and then look for it? The old maid looked at a large water stain on Qin Wanru's cuff and carefully suggested. You can't find it in a while. Qin Wanru shook her head without any hesitation, turned around and walked out. Their voices were not low, and Qin Yuru had been listening carefully. At this time, she sneered and secretly mocked Qin Wanru for being so petty. She lost an earring and didn't even have time to change her clothes. She actually went out to look for it, which was really shameful. However, this had nothing to do with her. She had better hope that everyone would see Qin Wanru's embarrassing look. The old maid was a little flustered. If you don't go, I will look for it myself. Qin Wanru saw her expression and turned to leave. I will go with you. Seeing that she left, the old maid had to follow her. They walked while looking for it, and slowly walked away. The courtyard became quiet again. Bored, Qin Yuru poured herself another cup of tea and drank it. The tea was very good, and its fragrance lingered in her mouth and teeth. She reached out to pull her dress and found a large wet spot, which happened to be in front of her. Why was there so much water in the fruit plate, and most of it had spilled on her? Chapter 190. Just at the end of the wing room near her, the door suddenly opened, and a handsome man in a snow-colored undergarment appeared at the door. When he saw Qin Yuru sitting in front of the stone bench with her overskirt lifted, he was stunned for a moment, and then he let out a sharp scream of horror and hid in the room. Qin Yuru froze and looked at the scene in front of her in astonishment. For a moment, she didn't know how to react. Originally, she also wanted to scream, but the man beat her to it, so she didn't have time to react. The opposite wing room became quiet again, as if no one had ever been there. There was someone here, and it was a man. Qin Yuru suddenly came to her senses, stood up, and turned to run. Suddenly, the back of her head went black, and she fell on the stone table. A person who looked like a guard appeared behind her. After knocking her out, the guard walked to the door of the previous room, gently knocked on the door, and whispered, "Master." "What's the matter?" A cold voice came from inside. "Marquis called me over for something just now." The guard also began to have cold sweat on his head. He didn't expect that he just left for a while, and how could a woman come into the courtyard, dressed like this, and drink the master's tea? Qin Yuru's skirt was lifted just now, so the guard didn't see clearly. He thought that she came to seduce the master because her clothes were untidy. "Do you know which mansion she comes from?" The voice inside asked coldly. "I don't know, I haven't seen her." The guard shook his head. Throw her at the back door. The voice behind the door paused and said. Not knowing Qin Yuru's identity, the master inside also had scruples. Some of the madams and misses who came to the banquet today were not ordinary. If they really made trouble, it would not be good for Duke Xing's mansion or him. If it was really some distinguished and extraordinary misses, he couldn't really do it, and this woman didn't see him. However, since she ruined his plan, he didn't intend to let her go so easily. Yes, I'll do it in a minute. The guard already knew what to do, and immediately nodded. The door opened, and the handsome man from before walked out with a pale face. Behind him was a man wearing a cloak. The brim of the cloak was down, so his face could not be seen clearly. The man in the cloak walked up to Qin Yuru and looked at her face. He did not recognize her, so he snorted and kicked the stone stool over. The guard was so scared that he lowered his head, knowing that his master was angry. The mysterious man remembered her face in his heart. He couldn't do it this time, but it didn't mean that he wouldn't have a chance next time. After looking at her face, he turned around and walked to the back. There was a small door at the back, and it was not far from the back door of Duke Xing's mansion. After he and the elegant man left Duke Xing's mansion quietly, the guard came over and picked up Qin Yuru, who had fainted just now. He half-carried her and took her to the door of the backyard of Duke Xing's mansion. After opening the door halfway, he threw her in the door and turned to leave quickly. When Qin Wanru followed the old maid back, she saw Mei Shui and Yujie walking back from a distance, so she and the old maid went to greet them. Miss, why did you come out? Yujie's eyes flickered and she asked cleverly. My earring is missing. I couldn't find it after looking for it. Qin Wanru said. How could it be missing? I'll help you find it. Yujie looked panicked, but she was relieved in her heart. She was worried about Qin Wanru before, so she took the clothes and ran back in a hurry. She remembered clearly that the young Miss's earrings were still there when she left. Second miss, where is our miss? Mei Shui followed Yujie and ran very hurriedly. She didn't dare not to run. If second miss's clothes arrived and she didn't get hers, she would be punished after returning to the mansion. Your miss went in alone and waited in the yard to drink tea. Qin Wanru pointed casually and said. Mei Shui looked in that direction and hurriedly separated from them and went to the yard. Qin Wanru continued to look for her miss with the old maid and servant girls. The weather in autumn was dry. After going back and forth, the water stains on the dress were almost dry. When they were about to return to the banquet, Mei Shui rushed to them with a pale face. People at the banquet were enjoying the flowers and drinking at the same time. They were very comfortable. Suddenly seeing a servant girl rushing to them, they immediately knew that something had happened. They all whispered to each other to ask which mansion this servant girl came from. Mei Shui's face was as pale as snow. She was so flustered that she couldn't care about her own behavior. She ran behind Qin Wanru and said, Second miss, first miss is missing. This sentence was clearly heard by the people at the nearby banquet table. Some people stood up in shock. Something must have happened. A miss suddenly disappeared. The noise this time was so big that even Madame of Duke Xing, who was far away, heard the news immediately. She immediately stood up and rushed over with a few servant girls and old maids. Seeing Madame of Duke Xing stood up, other madams and misses who followed her also stood up and came to Qin Wanru. Countess Yong, who was outside the crowd, saw that Qin Wanru was here but Qin Yuru was not. Her face suddenly darkened. Big sister was with me just now. How could she not be here? Qin Wanru narrowed her eyes, turned to look at the old maid of Duke Xing's mansion and said, When we left just now, did big sister sit under that tree and drink tea? Yes, I saw it clearly. It is true. The old maid said repeatedly. How could that person disappear? Mei Shui cried out in panic. Let's go and have a look. Qin Wanru said decisively and turned to leave. What happened? The voice of Madame of Duke Xing came from behind the crowd, and everyone immediately made way for them. Madame of Duke Xing, just now a servant girl of your mansion overturned the fruit plate on Big Sister and me, making our clothes wet. The servant girl asked this nanny to take us to change clothes. When we walked to the yard, I found that the earring was missing, so I came back to look for it. Big Sister stayed in the yard alone to drink tea, but now the servant girl said that she was missing. Qin Wanru listened to the old maid's question and told the story in a very orderly way. The meaning in her words was also clear. If there was an accident, Duke Xing's mansion could hardly get rid of the responsibility, and the cause was the people of Duke Xing's mansion. Which servant girl? Madame of Duke Xing's face darkened. I don't know her. Just now a servant girl came to ask me to take these two misses to change clothes. There were so many people at that time, and I didn't recognize her. I just wanted to take these two misses there as soon as possible. The old maid replied in a hurry. A servant girl she didn't know. If she went in at that time, the old maid would not be able to find them, and then there would be no evidence to prove what she said at that time. Qin Wanru raised her watery eyes slightly and glanced at the old maid calmly. Although the old maid was flustered, her expression and behavior were somewhat orderly. Qin Wanru's eyes became gloomy for a moment. Let's go and look for her. Maybe she didn't see clearly. Madame of Duke Xing saw that she could not ask anything, so she could only say. A large group of people followed her back to the remote courtyard. Once they entered the courtyard, everyone helped to look for her. How could a person disappear in such a good condition? Qin Wanru's eyes fell on the stone stool that Qin Yuru had been sitting on. The stone stool looked normal, but she clearly remembered that there was a small plum-shaped stone on the side of the stone stool facing her. Now the plum-shaped stone was turned over to the inside side. Of course, Qin Yuru would not do such a thing, and even if she wanted to move it, she could not move it. Looking at those quiet and peaceful wing rooms, it seemed that there was no difference from just now. Miss, the door of that room is not locked. Yujie stood beside Qin Wanru and lowered her voice. When she followed Mingqiu Nun that day, she especially used this method to confuse people. The door lock was put on it, but it did not mean that the door was locked. It was just that the lock was put on the door frame. At first glance, it seemed that the door was really locked. Qin Wanru could be sure that there was something wrong with the door. But this matter had nothing to do with her, so she just glanced at it and then turned away. She gently pinched Yujie's hand. Yujie understood and also turned away, as if she did not find the strangeness of this wing room at all. Found it, at the back door. Someone shouted behind the room. Everyone hurriedly turned around and saw that the back door of this courtyard was not far from the back door of Duke Xing's mansion. Qin Yuru, whose clothes were turned up in a mess, was lying on the ground, motionless. Mei Shui rushed over in shock and shouted anxiously, First miss, what's wrong with you?" She put her hand under her nose and felt relieved when she felt her breath. Qin Yuru was awakened by a sharp cry. She opened her eyes and saw a bunch of faces in front of her, and then closed her eyes again. She felt a dull pain in her head, as if she had been hit by something. First miss, wake up, wake up." Seeing her wake up, Mei Shui was overjoyed. Qin Yuru opened her eyes again. This time, she saw the people in front of her clearly. For a moment, she widened her eyes in astonishment, and her lips trembled. She turned her head left and right, and suddenly remembered the screaming man in white underwear she saw. Where is he?" She almost said these words in a murmur. "Miss, who else is there?" "There is no one else here." "Are you dizzy?" Mei Shui saw her and hurriedly reminded her loudly. This place was so hidden that there would be no one. If Qin Yuru really wanted to see someone, he must not be a good person in this place. It was even easy to suspect another aspect. Where is he? Qin Yuru was still confused and did not understand what Mei Shui meant. She was stunned and said in panic. She did not understand what was going on until now. Chapter 191. Looking outside, there was no one at all. Everyone looked at each other, not knowing the reason for this. Thinking of the first Miss Chen's messy clothes just now, could it be that someone had disobeyed the rules and knocked first Miss Chen unconscious after discovering that someone had come? Thinking about it, it seemed that there was only one possibility. Otherwise, she would not look for someone in a panic. They really did not know whether to say that the first Miss Chen was lucky or unlucky. Fortunately, it seemed that it was not a big deal. Everyone present had sharp eyes. Although the clothes were messy, they did not really fall. However, it would not be a good thing for anyone to get involved in this kind of thing. Especially for this kind of young girl, her reputation would always be tarnished. Help the first Miss Chen up quickly. It's good that she is fine. Madame of Duke Xing said as if nothing had happened, and asked someone to help Qin Yuru up. At this time, Qin Yuru had also completely woken up. When she was surrounded by people and saw the wing room, she made a terrified sound and could not say anything for a while. First Miss Chen, do you have anything to say? Did you see something that you are afraid of? Tell us and let us help you to evaluate it together. Madame of Duke Xing asked with a smile and a kind look. However, Qin Yuru could not say a word. She could not say that she saw a man in underwear. For the sake of her reputation, she could only say that she did not see anything. Thank you, madam. I just drank tea here and then fainted. Qin Yuru looked pale and said in a trembling voice. Madam, please check whether there is anyone here. Qin Wanru stood still and said quietly. No one will come here. The womenfolk are also at the banquet just now. If it is. Speaking of this, Madame of Duke Xing hesitated for a moment. Obviously, she thought that it was not the womenfolk. Qin Yuru's hand trembled. She grabbed Madame of Duke Xing's hand and said in a panic, there is no need to check, that person should have escaped from the back door, so he is definitely not from your mansion. She was afraid that Madame of Duke Xing would really investigate it. Although she had only seen the person before, she could tell from his sharp scream that he was not a child from an aristocratic family. If she really found out that there was such a person, and he was just a servant, how could she end this matter? Qin Yuru would rather not find this person. Her panic look was seen by others, and they only felt more confused. Was it possible that this first Miss Chen was meeting someone privately? Otherwise, why was she so protective? But it did not seem. Why did she knock her out? Could it be possible that she pretended to faint? In the backyard of a big family, there were many cases of pretending to faint and acting coquettishly. There were many madams who pretended to be sick, stupid, crazy, or fainted. Several of them picked up their handkerchiefs and wiped their lips. It seemed that this Miss Chen's character was not good. Although they were a little confused about why it happened so coincidentally, thinking that it might have something to do with the people in Duke Xing's mansion, they became more and more excited. They thought that heir of Miss Duke King. It is. It. Heir of Duke. Many people denied it after thinking for a while. They felt that the heir of Duke Xing was a very good person. They had never heard that he liked women, so it should be impossible. Could it be another male master in the mansion? Qin Wanru glanced at the crowd indifferently and saw everyone's conjecture. She sneered in her heart. It should have been prepared for me. He deceived me to come here and then left. Yu Jie went to get clothes. I was left alone here. She should have seen something unspeakable. Then she was knocked out and thrown at the back door. Duke Xing's mansion is holding a banquet today, so it is impossible to kill me. When I wake up, I will look like Qin Yuru, or even worse. I can't even find the servant girl who threw the fruit plate on me or the old maid who led the way. At that time, they will definitely say that I want to have an affair with someone. At least Qin Yuru has an old maid as a witness. Seeing that Qin Yuru's words had aroused the suspicion of many madams and misses, Madame of Duke Xing was a little angry. She shook off Qin Yuru's hand and said with a cold look, Miss Qin, it must have nothing to do with our mansion. I will ask someone to check it out later, so that Miss Qin will not suffer inexplicable grievances. Seeing that Qin Yuru's words had aroused the suspicion of many madams and misses, Madame of Duke Xing was a little angry. She shook off Qin Yuru's hand and said with a cold look, "Miss Qin, it must have nothing to do with our mansion. I will ask someone to check it out later, so that Miss Qin will not suffer inexplicable grievances." How could she not see through everyone's thoughts? If Qin Yuru had not said that, others would not have suspected Duke Xing's mansion. Now with her words, it really made people think that it had something to do with the male master of Duke Xing's mansion. Madame of Duke Xing hated it the most when her family members knew their own affairs. "Thank you, madam," Qin Wanru said in front of Qin Yuru. "It doesn't matter. This is what our mansion should do. Second miss is Hao-er's benefactor. First miss's affairs are also our mansion's affairs." Madame of Duke Xing calmed down and her face became calm again. Although there was still a little displeasure on Qin Yuru's face, it was basically invisible. Qin Wanru and Qin Yuru changed their clothes again. When they returned to the table, Shui Rulan anxiously took her hand and asked in a low voice, "What happened?" "It's okay." Qin Wanru patted Shui Rulan's hand to comfort her. Before she left, she had hinted that no matter what happened, Shui Rulan should not come over. She was afraid that if Countess Yong was in a mess and plotted evil again, Shui Rulan's belly would be in danger. Seeing her look, Shui Rulan also knew that something had happened before, but it should not be a big problem. Qin Yuru, who had changed her clothes, tightly pursed her lips and looked livid, but she did not say anything. It happened so suddenly that she still had not figured out who plotted against her. She looked at all the people present and then turned her eyes to Countess Yong. She felt that only Countess Yong was the most trustworthy. She stood up and walked to Countess Yong's table regardless of everyone's surprised eyes. "Aunt!" Seeing Countess Yong, Qin Yuru's eyes turned red and she called her in a low voice. Seeing Qin Yuru coming over, Countess Yong hurriedly stood up, smiled apologetically to several madams around her, and then took Qin Yuru to one side to talk. When everyone followed them just now, Countess Yong did not follow them. "Yuru, what's wrong? What happened just now?" Aunt originally wanted to come over and have a look, but was stopped by other madams, Countess Yong said with concern. She had always seen how much old Madame of Duke Yong valued this granddaughter. "Aunt!" Qin Yuru called in a low voice as if she had seen her own family member, and then threw herself into Countess Yong's arms and cried sadly. Don't cry, don't cry. What's going on? Did the two over there plot against you again?" Countess Yong gently patted Qin Yuru's back and comforted her while saying. Her words reminded Qin Yuru. She cried and said in a low voice, "Aunt, are they really the two of them? The servant girl and the old maid are from Duke Xing's mansion." Of course, she knew that Countess Yong was talking about Qin Wanru and Shui Rulan. There are so many servants in Duke Xing's mansion. It is very easy to bribe two of them. "You are so silly," Countess Yong said. "It must be them. I don't know anyone here. Why would someone plot against me like this? It turns out to be them," Qin Yuru said viciously. She had been a little suspicious of them, but couldn't figure it out at the moment. Hearing Countess Yong's words, she immediately believed them. Qin Wanru and Shui Rulan were good. She would not forget the shame today. Well, don't cry. If a beautiful girl cries, she will not be beautiful. Then Yen will think that I bullied you. Seeing that her words worked, Countess Yong persuaded her in a low voice. Qin Wanru calmly withdrew her eyes from Countess Yong and Qin Yuru, and a trace of coldness flashed in her eyes. Needless to say, Countess Yong pushed the blame on her and her mother. She was not afraid that Qin Yuru and Madame D would plot against her. Originally, Qin Yuru and Madame D wanted her and her mother to die. They framed her again and again in Jiangzhou, which almost made them die. It did not matter if Qin Yuru and Madame D hated her for one more thing. But she did not want to be a sharp weapon in others' hands. She could see clearly that it was Countess Yong's plot. But how could Countess Yong know so clearly about the things in Duke Xing's mansion? Qin Yuru obviously saw something that could not be said, and then she was knocked out. The yard was originally a suspicious point. It was close to the door of the backyard, which was convenient to get in and out. It was not the inner yard or the outer yard, but it naturally hid secrets and was a convenient place to get in and out. Since there was a secret, it seemed that it could not be easily found. If it was not for Madame of Duke Xing's means, it would not have been possible. In order to deal with her, she did not hesitate to expose a great secret. It seemed that she thought too highly of her and used a sledgehammer to kill a chicken. Could it be that there was a follow-up to this matter? Narrowing her watery eyes slightly, she quietly thought about what other possibilities in this situation. Who is it? The man sat by the window and asked coldly. It's the eldest daughter of Ningyuan Army General's mansion who came to the capital city to report. A chubby man reported respectfully. Ningyuan Army General Qin Huayong? The man said the name word by word. Yes, it's him. The fat man nodded repeatedly. It's a good candidate. The man smiled coldly, and his eyes fell on a file in front of him strangely. He looked through it for a few times and said, "Have you dealt with the matter?" "Don't worry, it's all been dealt with." The fat man hurriedly lowered his head and said, "On this file were not only some outstanding officials in the imperial court, but also some misses from aristocratic families, as well as their comments and portraits." "And your daughters?" "For me, you've really done your best." The man raised a portrait and chuckled. Chapter 192. Is there any activity after the banquet? The man asked with deep eyes. No activity. It is originally a plum appreciation party, so most of the women will leave. The fat man thought for a while and said. Don't let it affect me. The cold voice was a little murderous. Although it was low, it made people secretly scared. Don't worry. The fat man said hurriedly, and his forehead began to sweat. If this man really wanted to do something today, it would be troublesome. You're on your own. The man snorted coldly, stood up and strode out. The banquet of Duke Xing's mansion was quite successful, except for a small interlude. After all, Qin Yuru was not a famous miss from an aristocratic family in the capital city. Although everyone thought what she had done was very disgraceful and this miss might not have a good character, this matter did not have a big impact on the overall banquet of Duke Xing's mansion. But this matter did not make a big impact on the whole banquet of Duke Xing's mansion. After all, nothing really happened, and no one saw the man. Everything was just a guess. As for the reputation of the first Miss Qin, everyone had a tacit understanding that at least their mansion would not marry such a girl. However, seeing Qin Yuru walking beside Countess Yong, some nosy madams were inquiring about the relationship between the two families. So there was another saying that Duke Yong's mansion would marry Qin's mansion. And it was this first Miss Qin. For a moment, many madams looked at Countess Yong with a little pity in their eyes, only looking at Countess Yong's face. It was hard to hide. Anger. However, no one said anything in front of her face, so Countess Yong could not find a chance to explain even if she wanted to. Good news did not go out, but bad news spread for thousands of miles. As soon as this matter came out of the gate of Duke Xing's mansion, it immediately made many people curious about Qin's mansion. Then some well-informed people dug out the previous rumor, saying that Madame D, who married from Duke Yong's mansion, was not in charge of the domestic affairs of the family now. The reason was that Madame D was said to be a bad person and liked to stir up trouble viciously. She wanted Madame Shui, the co-wife of Qin's mansion, to have a miscarriage. Such a vicious behavior, of course, could not be in charge of the domestic affairs. Originally, what Madame D had done was only spread in the marketplace and had not been spread to the aristocratic families. However, now that it was mixed with Qin Yuru's matter, it became more and more unpleasant to hear. All kinds of rumors were flying all over the place, together with the rumors of the aristocratic families. When Madame D heard the news from Duke Yong's mansion, she almost fainted with anger. Although these were all rumors without any evidence, many people had witnessed Qin Yuru's incident. Therefore, they talked about it in a vivid manner. There were even some erotic jokes, which were spread very badly for a while. Although the inner court of Qin's mansion wasn't doing well, Qin Huaiyong's appointment had been smoothly confirmed. The vice-domain chief of the Imperial Guards camp, a lower third-rank official position. He would also be given the title of Ningyuan Army General. However, this Ningyuan Army General was not the previous Ningyuan Army General. This was a position that Qin Huaiyong could never have imagined. He was only a fifth-rank official before. As soon as the news came, everyone in the mansion was happy. The mark of Qin's mansion in front of the mansion gate was removed and replaced with the mark of Ningyuan Army General's mansion. In the capital city, where there were all high-ranking officials and aristocratic families, the vice-domain chief was not a high official, but a close minister of the emperor. The Imperial Guards camp and several other camps were in charge of the security of the capital city. If he was not valued by the emperor, he would never be placed in the Imperial Guards camp. As soon as the news came out, people who had some relationship with Qin's mansion became enthusiastic and came to congratulate them. Madame Dowager also looked refreshed. Her illness was almost gone, and she seemed to be almost the same as when she was not sick in the past. She asked someone to find Qin Huaiyong. She thought it was troublesome to thank so many people one by one. She wanted to hold a wedding banquet as a courtesy. Qin Huaiyong didn't doubt it and asked Madame Dowager and Shui Rulan to handle it. Shui Rulan was a little pregnant now. Fortunately, it was only a little and not obvious. With Madame Dowager's guidance, she could manage things. This was the first time that she hosted a banquet in the capital city. Naturally, she couldn't be careless. She wanted to do a good job wholeheartedly. Qin Wanru saw that she was really tired sometimes, so she helped her. With Madame Dowager's guidance and Qin Wanru's help, Shui Rulan steadily took over the internal affairs of Ningyuan Army General's mansion. There were also 2 concubines who were in charge. The whole Ningyuan Army General's mansion was gradually in order. After being busy for about half a month, Yujie suddenly caught a servant girl and came in one day. "Miss, this servant girl sneaked out and was caught by me," Yujie said as soon as she entered the door. Qin Wanru put down the account book in her hand and looked at the servant girl below. Looking at the servant girl's age and timid appearance, she knew that she was just the most ordinary servant girl. She blinked and looked at Yujie in confusion. In fact, this kind of thing didn't need to be reported to her. "What do you mean?" Qin Wanru asked, rubbing her eyebrows which were a little painful. "This servant girl is from our yard. She has always followed Qing Shui. This time, she sneaked out," Yujie said angrily. Qin Wanru's eyes swept over the little servant girl, and her eyes became slightly cold. "Tell me, what's the matter?" Hearing Yujie's words, she really looked a little familiar. She turned out to be someone from her yard. There were many servant girls and old maids in the yard, so Qin Wanru didn't pay much attention to them. "Second miss, I really have something to do. Sister Xiao is sick and wants to see Nanny Dong, so she asked me to see her." The servant girl knelt down and said in a panic. "Dong Xiao is sick." Qin Wanru narrowed her watery eyes and looked at Yujie. Recently, she had been busy with many things, so she didn't pay much attention to Dong Xiao. Nanny Dong was also busy with the business of the shop outside, and occasionally came in with a message. Thinking of this, it was true that she hadn't seen Nanny Dong for a long time. She is sick, but not very serious. Nanny Yu has called a doctor for her before, and he said that she would be fine after taking a few doses of medicine. Yujie replied. She needs to see Nanny Dong for such a small thing. Qin Wanru's eyes darkened a little. Dong Xiu was not a child, so she didn't know the seriousness of the matter at this time. Yes, it's Nanny Xiu's idea. She hasn't seen Nanny Dong for a long time, and she is sick, so she especially wants to see Nanny Dong, the little servant girl said hurriedly. Qin Wanru's face darkened. Since Dong Xiu wants to see Nanny Dong, she should come and tell me. Why did she ask you to sneak out? Yujie, see what she has on her. The little servant girl was so scared that her face changed dramatically, and she subconsciously reached out to cover her cuffs. Yujie came over, pulled her hand away, and pulled out a hairpin and a handkerchief that she tightly covered in her sleeve. It was a very beautiful hairpin, which was the one Qin Wanru saw on Dong Xiu's head that day. Dong Xiu couldn't afford to wear such a hairpin at this time, and it shouldn't be with Dong Xiu now. How dare she steal things? Miss, look at this hairpin. Yujie handed the hairpin to Qin Wanru and said sternly, if she dares to steal things from the mansion, she will be beaten and driven out of the mansion. Second miss, I didn't steal it. Sister Xiu asked me to give it to Nanny Dong. I didn't steal it. When the little servant girl heard that she would be beaten and driven out of the mansion, she was so scared that her face turned pale. She shook her hands and was so anxious that she burst into tears. Does this hairpin belong to Dong Xiu? Qin Wanru's eyes fell on the hairpin and she asked lightly. Yes, it belongs to Sister Xiu. Sister Xiu asked me to put it in Nanny Dong's place because she was worried about it. The little servant girl said repeatedly, Sister Xiu said that it's not good to say this kind of thing, and she was afraid that second miss would regard her as an outsider, so she asked me to sneak out and give it to Nanny Dong. Did Xiu say where Nanny Dong is? Qin Wanru asked slowly, hiding a trace of coldness in her eyes. Was it just a matter of a hairpin? Originally, this hairpin came inexplicably, and it was most likely to be handled by Qin Shui. Now she felt that it was not so simple. It was not safe to keep it with her, so she wanted to send it to Nanny Dong's place. How many things did Dong Xiu lose to make her feel so unsafe? Since they moved in, Nanny Yu had kept the yard in good order. She had never heard of anyone losing things. Why was Dong Xiu so worried that she had to send the hairpin to Nanny Dong, who was outside the mansion? Sister Xiu has told me that Madame Dong is cleaning up the shop. I know where to find Madame Dong. The little servant girl said hurriedly, for fear that Qin Wanru would not believe her if she spoke slowly. Why is there a word on it? Qin Wanru raised her eyes and looked at the little servant girl. The word was very obscure, very small, and it was in the shape of a flower. If one was not careful, one would only think it was in the shape of a flower. I don't know how to read. The little servant girl said with a blank face. Did Dong Xiu give it to you? Qin Wanru's face darkened. A little servant girl who knew nothing. Yes. Sister Xiu gave it to me. The little servant girl nodded repeatedly. Is there anyone to testify? Qin Wanru narrowed her eyes. No, there was only me and Sister Xiu in the room at that time. The little servant girl was flustered. She was anxious and scared, wiping her tears. Qin Wanru leaned back and said in a low voice, if there is no one to testify, then it can't be explained clearly. You can go and receive your punishment. Yujie responded and came over to pull the servant girl. When the servant girl saw that Yujie was really going to pull her out, she also panicked. Second miss, Sister Xiu can testify. What if she doesn't admit it? Qin Wanru smiled slightly, with a bit of coldness in her smile. Whoever gets involved in this kind of thing is unlucky. Do you think Xiu will admit it now? The hairpin on it is printed with the word Qin, and I didn't give Xiu any hairpin. Where did she get it? Her words stunned the little servant girl, and her face turned pale without a trace of blood. If she really thought about it, it meant that the hairpin was not obtained in a proper way. Since it was not obtained in a proper way, Dong Xiu would certainly not admit it now that the matter was blown up. She was the scapegoat. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.